Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again on this Sunday evening. And if you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit that notification bell for future videos. You're watching a dual stream with Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, the home of revolutionary African-centered propaganda, and of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe you could gain a competitive advantage by always, keyword, always betting on Black. We're here, once again, what I believe will elicit an evocative conversation. This evening, we're going to be discussing inside the Nation of Islam, cult or community, with Brother Daniel Omowale. Brother Omowale, what's the word? How you doing?
I'm doing fine, my brother. Peace. I'm going to say in African and Yoruba, Alafia to you. Okay. And we're going to get into what we got to discuss.
Yes, sir. The man, the myth, the legend from Illadel's finest, as they like to say, right? But very quickly, before we get started, what part of Philadelphia are you from?
I'm originally from North Philadelphia. Okay, I lived all over Philadelphia. I lived in West Philly, North Philly, Germantown, West Oak Lane, all through South Philly. I lived all over Philly.
Okay.
But I'm from North Philly originally. I'm originally from North Philly.
North Philly. Shout out to Temple University, North Bar Street, the whole nine, right?
Yes.
I know you're a huge B-Hop fan. I already know.
Yeah, I am. Absolutely. I like Bernard Hopkins. He's a good boxer.
Absolutely.
I'm a Joe Frazier fan too. You know.
Yeah, as well you should be. You know, Boots is the next big thing coming out of Philly.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy it because Joe Frazier is from South Carolina and my father's from South Carolina.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So before we get this conversation started, many would argue, listen, Lumumba Speaks, Bequaline Network, this is a Pan-Africanist platform. Why are you seeking to interrogate a Black organization, right? That's the question I'm quite sure is out there amongst the viewers. And I think it's very simple. We understand as Pan-Africanists, as individuals who are advocating to restore African people to our traditional greatness as a free, proud, and productive people. But the enemies of African people are external as well as internal, right? And we understand that skin folk does not necessitate what?
Kin folks. All skin folks are not kin folks.
Absolutely. And so with that being said, we know during our sojourn here in the death, decadence, and dysphoria of the Western Hemisphere, there have been numerous times in which, unfortunately, people who look like us have done us wrong, right? We understand.
That's right.
That unfortunately, this takes place. Part of that is, I would argue, we tend to put our guard down when the individuals look like us. But a design, appreciate you tapping in, brother. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. I think you're already subscribed. Hope to be part of the conversation this evening. And so what happens is we want to make sure that we're critical of everyone. Queen Mother Sada Shakur, right? You know, she was putting in work out there on the East Coast, even in Philadelphia, right? She taught us we should be critical of everything and everybody.
That's right. And not only that, there was a woman that helped her escape, and she was what we consider a white woman that helped her escape. I don't know if a lot of people are aware of that.
I was not aware of that.
Just like it's all skin folks are not kin folks. Every person that's so-called white is not your enemy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we're going to be discussing the Nation of Islam. As many of the viewers know, and I'm quite sure you know, Nation of Islam was created 94 years ago, July 1930, under the leadership of Elijah Muhammad in Detroit, Michigan. Shout out to the 313.
Correction. In the beginning, it was under the leadership of Farad Muhammad.
Well, yes, according to
Yes. Because it was a guy before Ugan Ali was before Elijah Muhammad.
Got you.
He was in position before Elijah Muhammad because his name is Ugan Ali.
Okay. Very good. Yeah. Very good. Appreciate that correction. The nation that it's been known for its militant rejection of integration.
Yes.
Right? And of course, for the eloquent spokesperson of Black power and Black nationalism, one Malcolm X, also known as El Hajj Malik El Shabazz.
Yes, and also his name Omowale in Nigeria.
Yes,
Malcolm Omowale.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Absolutely. So the question we're asking this evening is the Nation of Islam a cult that utilizes Black nationalistic and religious dogma and its ability to create political and racial controversy to exploit poor and working class African Americans for their leaders' economic and political gain? Or is the nation a revolutionary grassroots organization committed to the liberation of African people at home and abroad. So,
Well,
brother,
I'm gonna say it like this. You got to understand that. I'm gonna give you a backdrop. You got to remember. You got to understand. Mr. Elijah Muhammad came from Georgia, and
that's true.
he come from sharecropper background. He didn't have the fortune to get an education like most people did. Like most people, matter of fact, majority of the people that followed Farad Muhammad in the 30s, a lot of them migrated from the South. A lot of them were sharecroppers, which means a lot of them were not high in education. A lot of them dropped out of, didn't even get to go to school. Some of you just went up to the 4th or 5th grade. That was Mr. Elijah Muhammad.
Right.
So you got to understand. So the guy that taught him, had more of an edge on him. Okay. And when before Mr. Elijah Muhammad met Farad Muhammad, he was a alcoholic. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I'm aware of that. I'm aware.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into that, a little bit of the history. However, the nation isn't what it once was, of course, during its peak in the 1950s and 60s, particularly after the death or transition, as we like to use on this platform, of Elijah Muhammad. So with that being said, can you share with us why you joined the nation? Give us a little bit about your background on why you chose to join the Nation of Islam.
Well, when I was 13 years old, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley, and it had an effect on me. So I started believing a lot of stuff that the nation taught at that time. You know what I mean? I started believing that what we call white people, I believe all of them were devils, and I and when I turned 15 or 16. I took my shahada and joined them. I went to the masjid, and then from there, I was walking down Broad Street, past Broad and Cumberland. I seen these brothers out there, clean shaven. They caught my interest. So I went by there, and I decided to go into the mosque. When I went into the temple or the mosque, they frisked me, and I noticed that a lot of those brothers didn't look like their age. One brother told me he was 32. He looked like my age. He was like I was 8. I think I was 17. He looked like he was 17 years old. And I could have, that kind of, took me for a loop. I was like, I want that fountain of youth. What are you doing to make yourself look like that? I was just amazed. And then, I was amazed about the discipline that they had. And I noticed a lot of them had their family structure in place. They had the nuclear family. Majority of the people I knew from the nation that had families, they had their nuclear family. They had their father, mother. They had the whole thing. That caught my attention too. It was a lot of things. And Mr. Farrakhan played a role in why I joined the nation too.
Okay.
He played a role in that too. I have to admit, I got to tell the truth.
And what role was that?
Oh, some brother I used to hear speeches. He used to come on the radio. It was a radio station. I think it was WAS or WHAT, and I used to hear him on the radio. And a lot of stuff. I said, "Damn, he remind me of Malcolm." I mean, that's what I thought at the time. I'm gonna be honest with you. I said, "Damn, he remind me of Malcolm. He sound like Malcolm." And that's how I got hooked.
Got you. Very good. So let's talk about the organization under Elijah Muhammad. Many have argued that the nation's philosophy, its goals, even organizational structure has changed under the leadership of Louis Farrakhan. What differences do you see?
Okay, the differences I see is that under Elijah Muhammad, they were more productive. They had more businesses. They had a school. They had Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Mr. Elijah Muhammad had 46 independent schools in every city. He had businesses. Under Elijah Muhammad, he even owned a bank. They had a bank in Chicago. Okay, they owned everything. They were productive. They were doing it. They owned farmland. They had way more than what Mr. Farrakhan did.
Right, but we know Wallace liquidated much of what the nation had when he became the head.
Yeah, I found out the truth about that because at the time I thought he just did it because he was trying to be spiteful. But I talked to some old timers. They said what happened was a lot of his family, Mr. Elijah Muhammad's family, and some officials were digging in. It was had sticky hands. Right. I'm gonna say it like that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'm familiar.
With that. There was some type of corruption with that.
Right. So let me ask you this question. The Nation of Islam prides itself on being an independent Black organization, particularly during its heyday under the leadership of Elijah Muhammad. However, you shared with me in a conversation we had offline a couple of days ago that is not necessarily the case. Can you talk to me about H.L. Hunt, who he is, and his contributions financially to the Nation of Islam?
Well, he financed the Ku Klux Klan, and he financed the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
Okay, and Malcolm learned that later on. He touched on it. I'm saying Malcolm did in the speech. You have to get this. It's a brother out there. He got the documentary. He did it so beautifully on Malcolm X. His name was Omar Shabazz. He got video. He does a documentary on the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad. And he put out a speech when Malcolm touched on that.
Right. And so H.L. Hunt, who was H.L. Hunt?
He was a millionaire. He was he believed he was a white supremacist, you know what I'm saying? And he had money. He was a wealthy man that had money.
Right.
And he liked the nation because they taught like separation, just like the Ku Klux Klan taught separation.
Right. So Drusky is asking, could you name the speech?
I can't remember the speech offhand, but I can't remember. I remember seeing it. I remember hearing it. You know what I'm saying? It blew my mind when I heard it.
Right. But I do know that this information is readily available due to
yes, it is. It's available.
The Freedom of Information Act, the FBI had the Nation of Islam's headquarters wiretap. And so if you read the book, The Plot to Kill
Judas Factor?
The Judas Factor. If you read golly, what's the other book I had?
Payne had a book out too. Oh man.
Carl Evans' book, The Messenger,
yes.
the Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad. This information is readily apparent. So just very quickly, I understand the nation had its own money. We had trade with other nations, but it doesn't have as much money as it purported to have. And this is factual information that the Nation of Islam received financial largesse from a white supremacist by the name of H.L. Hunt. Matter of fact, like I said, you could do the research.
They did have their own money, but they also took donations from. Go ahead.
Kevin, aka Mr. K, states the speech was on February 15th, 1965, entitled "There's a Worldwide Revolution Going On." As we know, this was 6 days before Malcolm X was assassinated, taken from us before his time. 6 days, once again, 6 days, and I believe that speech he gave was in Detroit, Michigan. Once again,
I think it was in New York. I don't know if it was Detroit or New York. I don't know.
Right, it was one or the other. So
yes,
there's something. Once again, someone asked for the name of the speech, so on and so forth. So let's talk about Malcolm X. We talking about the poetic, articulate poet of Black nationalism, as Ossie Davis brilliantly eulogized him. We called him our shining Black prince. Let's talk about Malcolm. Why did Malcolm leave the nation?
Well, it was several reasons. I'm gonna tell you what happened. Mr. Elijah Muhammad treated Malcolm like he was his son. Matter of fact, from what I was told by some old timers and some reliable sources, an Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Mr. Elijah Muhammad, whatever you want to call him, treated Malcolm better than some of his own children. So that sparked some type of envy and jealousy amongst the family.
This is true.
He was facing that, and then he was facing envy and jealousy from some ministers.
Right.
So he was dealing with that situation.
Absolutely. Yes, very quickly, Kevin, aka Mr. K, says, appreciate you tapping in, brother, in the chat. H.L. Hunt was also the same paymaster behind the John Birch Society.
Yeah, he was part of the John Birch Society. I forgot about that. Yeah, that's correct.
George Rockwell's American Nazi Party, as well as the Klan. Absolutely, you're cooking with fish grease, brother Kevin. So after we finish the interview, definitely want you to tap in and be part of the conversation. And so there were some other issues regarding Malcolm. One, we talked about Malcolm questioning Elijah Muhammad's leadership, particularly after the deletion of several members of the FOI in Los Angeles, California.
Yes, that played a role. That played a role in it. Yes. Because at that time, when Malcolm was his national spokesman, even Mr. Elijah Muhammad said that anybody that harms and kills a Muslim should be killed. So when the situation actually went down, Malcolm thought that they was going to do something about it, and he was shocked that he was told to stand down. And the secretary, Ronald Stokes, Malcolm had a close relationship with him. The secretary that got killed in Los Angeles.
Right. Absolutely. And so one of the final issues was, well, so Drewski, we're gonna need you to tap in and be part of the conversation. Excuse me, about 20 minutes, so we can clear up some of the misinformation, because it appears that your perspective is based on some of the rhetoric and misinformation that's provided by individuals who have been members of the Nation of Islam. And this is a particular issue, as I have a relationship with a number of individuals who are members of the Nation. But actually, Drewski, that's not the case. When Malcolm was told that he would be silenced for 90 days, he complied immediately and said, no problem. Right? So
I know that though, but he still, it plays, that played a role. It's still, I talked to some old timers that played a role. That the incident that happened on that played a role in his his disagreement.
Very quickly, he did submit. He said 90 days. He said, I'll submit.
Yeah, he did submit. He did everything. He did everything he was supposed to do.
Right.
But
and hold on, very quickly. Then the leadership of the nation started saying, well, if he submits, after he already told that he would. Right.
Yeah, and then he got suspended indefinitely. Then he got suspended indefinitely.
He was asking to return. When can I return to the nation? He wasn't getting any direct answers. He even offered to bring Muhammad Ali as a way of going back to the nation. And what ended up finally taking place, he said, okay, I see where this is going. I would just have to, make a clean break. So that's what. But another issue, of course, was Elijah Muhammad's sexual improprieties with young women.
I'm gonna say something about that. That's not really was I mean, how can I see it? Because Malcolm dated one of those. He was courting one of those sisters that he got.
I'm aware of that. Yes.
No. Let me say something. In the beginning, when Malcolm heard about that, when he went to Elijah Muhammad and asked him about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or Mr. Elijah Muhammad admitted that he had children by other women. He admitted that to Malcolm, and Malcolm in the beginning wanted to come up with, because he said he was afraid that, he didn't say afraid, but he was concerned that a lot of followers were followed out about that, and they'll go back out in the world and lead the Nation of Islam. So he discussed, he wanted to come with a scriptural justification of Mr. Elijah Muhammad's question. You can read that in All Body for Malcolm. I mean, Malcolm X.
Absolutely.
Okay. He wanted to use the scripture like David slept with Bathsheba.
I'm aware.
Solomon, he wanted to do that. So he discussed it with certain ministers, and one enemy of, Captain Shaw, Yusuf Shaw, Captain Joseph, he went to him with it. He went to Farrakhan with it, and they went back and told Elijah Muhammad that he slandered Elijah, but he didn't slander Elijah Muhammad. He was trying to defend Elijah Muhammad.
Right.
So he went with that situation. That was the situation that happened too.
Right. One of the issues Malcolm mentioned, and he talks about this in, I think it's in Carl Evans' book, where Malcolm X stated, so you guys, very quickly. So you guys aren't using rhetoric, no proof. Show me your proof before you speak. And if Dr. West is welcome on your platform, reach out to him. So what I have the evidence, I have the literature behind me, reputable sources by academicians. So this isn't rhetoric. This isn't innuendo or misinformation.
I'm gonna tell you something. The nation under Farrakhan saying that he had more than one wife. But I did my research. It's a main library in Philadelphia called the Logan Square Library. It's the main library in Philadelphia. They have all the Muhammad Speaks on microfilm. And in those papers, Mr. Elijah Muhammad never claimed them women to be his wives.
Right.
Okay. In fact, in Muhammad Speaks, they called them women prostitutes and kicked them out.
Right.
They were called prostitutes. They were not referred to as his wives.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. They were actually excommunicated from the organization.
Yes, and I got another thing.
Very quickly.
Yes.
You say we have information that the FBI doesn't have. Actually, the FBI does have this information.
Yes, they did, because they was tapping Mr. Elijah Muhammad's phone as well as Malcolm. They was watching both of them.
Yes, and the reality of the situation, this information is readily available due to the Freedom of Information Act.
That's right. That's right.
Once again. As a matter of fact, much of the research that was done for Carl Evans' text, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad, for the Judas Factor, the plot to kill Malcolm X, etc., was based on the Freedom of Information Act.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, yes, and to provide triggers for evolution, yes. So we want to make sure we don't talk over each other. So I will speak, then you can speak, just so to be clear.
Okay, I got something else to tell you I didn't tell you. See, I had the privilege to be under another minister of Elijah Muhammad. He was named Shabazz too, and his name was Minister Jeremiah Shabazz. And I remember when I started working with when I left Farrakhan and started working with him, and I came and I told Minister Jeremiah that Mr. Elijah Muhammad had more than one wife, and he corrected me. He said Honorable Elijah Muhammad only had one wife, and that was Sister Claire Muhammad. Then I asked him, I said, brother, is it true that he had other children? He told me, yes, he did have other children. But his defense was, it's a story in the Quran that he used to try to defend it. He said, it says you cannot be a judge of a law servant, that you can't, that's what he used. Okay. Even though the Quran, even though nobody holds nobody sinless. That's what Minister Jeremiah used. But he told me the only wife that Mr. Elijah Muhammad had was Sister Claire Muhammad. Those women was not his wives.
Absolutely. Yes. And so this is an issue that, later on tried to clean up. We do know that Malcolm even stated that he later stated that Elijah Muhammad was not divine. He wasn't let alone he wasn't a man, let alone divine. He even called him a religious faker because of the situation. He said, I can understand as a man that you can make a mistake. He says,
yeah, I think it was.
We don't want to talk over each other.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Part of the issue that Malcolm talked about was the fact that he wouldn't own up to the mistake that he made, this issue. And of course, he even was willing to cover it up and even commit murder. Right? He said, this man isn't divine. He's not even a man. So once again, family, I'm going to let you speak. But somebody's asking for page numbers. So give me a second. I'm going to grab this book and then I'm going to break this down. Brother Jay, I see you in queue. Let us finish. We're going to finish the interview. Then I'll allow you to tap in. But can you talk to us about Thomas Hagen?
Oh, Thomas Hagen. He came out. He was the one that got caught on the scene. He was a member of the Newark, New Jersey Temple 25. He's the one that got caught in the scene with the 45. He's one of the assassins that killed Malcolm.
Right. So very quickly, I actually have it. Somebody asked for a page number. This is in The Messenger, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad by Carl Evans, page 318. Malcolm X retaliated against Muhammad for the attempts on his life by revealing as many of the Nation of Islam's false teachings as he possibly could. When he appeared on the Irv Kapechit show on January 30th, he described the messenger as a liar and a coward. Malcolm dismissed the notion that white media was using him to discredit Muhammad. As Malcolm saw it, the messenger had done a bang-up job of discrediting himself. While Elijah Muhammad is teaching is diametrically opposed to the principles of Islam and the Muslim world itself, he said the religious officials of Mecca and those at the top authority on Islam theology totally reject what Elijah Muhammad teaches as being Islam. On the other hand, what he is teaching can easily be defined as a religion, but it cannot be labeled Islam. As there were so few Islamic scholars and mosques in America, Malcolm said it was easy for any phony or faker to come along with a concocted, distorted product of his own making and say this is Islam. Are you by inference saying that Elijah Muhammad is a faker and phony? Malcolm explained that he had once believed in the messenger more than the messenger believed in himself. But that changed when the messenger was confronted with a crisis in his own personal life, and he did not stand up as a man. Anybody can make a moral mistake, but when they have to lie about it and be willing to see that murder is committed to cover up their mistakes, not only are they not divine, they're not even a man. This is what Malcolm X stated on January 30th, 1965 on the Irv Cup Sync show.
Okay, I'm going to say something about that. He didn't keep it hidden from certain ministers. You know what I'm saying? One minister, I told you that I was under Minister Jeremiah. He didn't keep it. He admitted to Minister Jeremiah that was his children. And he admitted to Malcolm. But the rank and file Muslims, he hid it from them. That's what he did. He hid it from the rank and file, the regular file. They didn't know about it. But some, you know what I'm saying? But the inner circle of the Nation of Islam, they knew about it.
Right, absolutely. So Thomas Hagen, we talked about Thomas Hagen. He was one of the individuals who, as we saw in the Malcolm X movie by Spike Lee, who was shot in the leg. One of the killers of Malcolm X who was shot in the leg. That individual, that was a factual scene, a historically accurate scene in the movie. That individual was Thomas Hagen, who was a member of the Nation of Islam's Newark Mosque in Newark, New Jersey. And he, of course, stated that he was, of course, approached by the Nation of Islam about a year before the assassination.
He was approached by an official of the Nation of Islam, who was the secretary at his
John
mosque, at his
Ali.
temple.
Yes, John Ali.
Yeah, John Ali was one of them. That's true.
Absolutely.
Matter of fact, he met with the John Ali met with the assassins
at a hotel.
but he denied it. But he denies that he never met with those people. But it was,
right. Let's talk about the role of the FBI and the CIA in working with the nation to assassinate.
Oh, the nation was infiltrated by the government. They were infiltrated by the. You gotta remember. You gotta understand. COINTELPRO.
Yes.
The Nation of Islam was a target of COINTELPRO, like any other organization, like the Black Panthers. Every organization you could name, SCLC by Martin Luther King. He was a target of COINTELPRO. So the nation was no different.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we are aware that the NYPD played a role.
Oh, they played a heavy role. They played a big role.
Very quickly, we know that when Malcolm would speak, there would literally be between 24 to 30 NYPD officers stationed wherever Malcolm was speaking. On Sunday, February 21st, 1965, at the Audubon Ballroom, they had only 2 NYPD officers stationed at the Audubon Ballroom. They had them located in the section of the building that was furthest from where Malcolm was speaking. Right.
Yes,
and
the
implication of the fact that they knew he was going to be assassinated on that day. In fact, from reading in the Judas Factor, it states that Betty Shabazz removed a handwritten detailed note that Malcolm had of the 5 individuals who were going to sent to assassinate him. Right. And so this is something, and all of those individuals were members of the Nation of Islam.
Okay, but I'm gonna say something about that. That was not the first assassination tip on Malcolm's life.
That is correct.
The very first assassination tip on Malcolm's life, when he was in the Nation of Islam, okay, what happened was the NYPD, he was living in an apartment with John Ali at the time. The NYPD came there and shot his house up, shot his apartment up.
Right. And yes,
and this is before the Fred Hampton. He was Fred Hampton before Fred Hampton.
Right.
But luckily he wasn't home that day.
Kevin, aka Mr. K, states Hagler was shot by Malcolm's bodyguard Reuben Francis, but folks forget Hagler was the second man shot. Second man Reuben shot. There was a second suspect that got escorted away from the scene. That is very.
He got shot in the stomach. He got shot in the stomach.
And remember, many people may be unaware, but Columbia University Hospital is right across the street from the Audubon Ballroom. I've been to the Audubon Ballroom. It's like on 100. It's in the 160s in Manhattan. It's in the 160s. So it's extremely northwest Manhattan. There's a hospital right across the street. In fact, when individuals went to Columbia University Hospital emergency room and got a stretcher to bring across the street to the Audubon, the individuals that commandeered the stretcher were arrested, right, for what? Commandeering hospital property. So once again, we talk about the police showed up and they were not interested in actually not only finding those who were responsible for Malcolm's death, but even helping try to resuscitate him and keep him alive.
So that's proof right there that it was bigger than the Nation of Islam. Even Malcolm said it was bigger than the Nation of Islam. Because you got to remember, when he went to France, he got denied entry in France. Absolutely. And he got poisoned in Cairo, Egypt.
Yes, that is very true. So what we find is that there were 3 entities that had a vested interest in Malcolm's death. The hierarchy of the nation, the FBI, and the CIA.
And the NYPD.
And the NYPD. So four entities that New York Police Department, Central Intelligence Agency, and then of course the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Nation of Islam. So let's move forward. Let's talk about some of the positives of the Nation of Islam. Oh,
they have a lot of positives. I got to admit that. Well, they build your self-esteem up. You know what I mean? Because you gotta remember, we was taught to hate ourselves. You know what I'm saying? The Nation of Islam built people's self-esteem up, made people disciplined who never had discipline in their life. I mean, Malcolm was a prime example of that. It was a bunch of people like Malcolm, who came from criminal backgrounds, was living wasn't living a good life, and they changed their life for the better. So the Nation of Islam did change a lot of people's lives for the better.
Yes. Now let's talk about the structure of the nation.
Oh, the structure is like it's a paramilitary structure.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And they have classes for the women and they have classes for the men.
Right. So we're talking about Muslim girls training in, of course,
Yeah,
the field of
GCC,
Islam.
General Civilization class.
Yes.
What they do, they teach women how to be women, and they teach men how to be men.
Right.
Okay, there's a lot of people who came in who had feminine tendencies. They turned them brothers around, made them masculine.
Right. So let's talk about funding of the nation, present day funding of the Nation of Islam. Most people may be unaware that there's audio of Malcolm in that he apologized to the nation and wanted to come back. Once again, we already covered that.
Yeah, that's true. We know about that. That's true.
I got it. Once again, we've already covered that. However, he wasn't allowed back in the nation.
That's right.
And afterwards, there were threats made on his life by several members and officials of the Nation of Islam. These are historical facts. Malcolm X stated this himself, right? Matter of fact, very quickly, Betty Shabazz. And, you can't mention Malcolm X without mentioning Betty Shabazz, and even his oldest daughter, Atalia Shabazz, talked about that in the aftermath of Malcolm's passing, his death, his assassination, that they would be approached on the streets of New York by members of the Nation of Islam and told, you better keep your mouth shut or the same thing will happen to you. She said it is live when she had a meeting with Farrakhan on, I think, 60 Minutes.
She had a meeting with his daughter.
Absolutely.
Yes, I saw that interview. And also, you got to remember, Farrakhan, he wrote in the Muhammad Speaks that Malcolm was worthy of death. He wrote that in the Muhammad Speaks.
Right. So once again, Drewski, now you are promoting misinformation. So one thing I don't allow on my platform is people to make statements that are patently false. I don't allow that. Right? I can understand you taking issue or umbrage with this information. It's typically hard for people to swallow. Typically, people will respond emotionally rather than intellectually to this information. But I don't allow people to make statements that are patently false. Can the guests talk about the process of masculinization with the men? What was the methodology used? Would like to hear more about that. Great point. Provide triggers for evolution. So, can you talk to us about the men who came into the nation who were effeminate? What methodological approach was used to masculinize those men? Great question, brother.
Okay. Well, they had different stuff, different things they taught. They taught military drill. You know what I'm saying? That was a factor. They taught how to be a man, what's a man's responsibility, that a man's supposed to provide for his family. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. A man's supposed to protect his family. And they taught self-defense. They taught you how to defend your family. It's a lot of factors. And they taught you how to, most of all, being masculine, they teach you how to have discipline. The most disciplined people I've ever met in my life came out of the NOI.
And so my experience. The discipline, how did they teach someone to become disciplined? So very quickly. So unfortunately, I was in the U.S. military. So part of that. Me too.
I was in both. I did that. So yes.
Part of that discipline was what? You had to wake up at a certain time.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Let me speak. Once again, we don't want to talk over each other.
It's not my fault. My fault.
You had to be well groomed at all times, and if you didn't, what? There was what we call incentive training, right? But you had to do exercises for X amount of time. So that was part of the self-discipline. Part of the process when I was in the military, I was my unit's non-commissioned PT NCOIC. So I was the unit's physical fitness officer. And we had a slogan when I ran the physical fitness program, and that was, don't get me killed because you're out of shape, right? So because we weren't supposed to leave a soldier on the battlefield, right? So once again, some of that discipline was it was imposed upon you that if you didn't do what was expected of you at the time in the way it was supposed to be done, there were consequences. So that would be some of the methodological approach I believe that he's speaking to. Could you provide a detailed analysis or account of that?
Yes, I remember if you showed up late at the temple or you showed up late at any appointments, they would make you do push-ups. Mm-hmm. They would discipline you until you got to you drop down and do those push-ups.
Right.
And they didn't tolerate no excuses. Matter of fact, on one of their literature, it says no excuses will be tolerated among the laborers of Islam. That's one of the lessons they have.
Right. I could say that in the Pan-Africanist organization that I helped co-found, the CAU, Coalition of African Unity, we had the same thing to where if you showed up late, you had to do push-ups. So if you showed up 2 minutes late, 20 push-ups. It was 10 push-ups for each minute, right? It didn't matter what the reason. If you came late, there were consequences. So you could do push-ups, you could do crunches, you could do body air squats, but you were going to get a workout, right? And so we wanted to instill discipline because we understood that there was a process from going from being a Negro to an African. Mm-hmm. Right, and we understand that part of the miseducation machine taught us that being a Negro was engaging in disempowering, self-defeating, and self-destructive behavior. That we had these unhealthy views of what it meant to be productive. Right, we could be late, we could be callous, we could be unprofessional, and we wanted to change that first and foremost in terms of how we worked with, and how we communicated, and how we socialized with our own brothers and sisters. So I can understand that. So let's move forward. We talk about.
I want to touch on something else that they did. They wasn't just you being late either. Your parents had to be on point. Now, if you went to the temple with a dirty white shirt on and it wasn't clean, they would give you a tongue lashing and make you drop down and do push-ups. They was into hygiene. You had to have hygiene. They were strict on hygiene, dietary law. You better not be caught eating no pork. You better not be caught eating more than one meal a day. You better not be caught chewing gum. It was a lot of disciplinary things that they took that made people disciplined.
Right. And so why did the nation implement the rule of eating one meal a day?
Well, because that came from Farad Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam, who taught Elijah Muhammad. He said that it's best for you that you'll live longer and that you won't age as fast. And not only that, they every month we used to fast 3 days out of a month. Not only just eat one meal a day, you had to fast for 3 days out of the month too.
Okay. And I do know that when Malcolm was part of the nation, he instilled a very strict program in terms of appearance to where you had to be a certain weight. And if you weren't,
they were strict on that. Yep. Matter of fact, Mr. Elijah Muhammad had a saying, weighing properly other than yourself. He was strict with that. You couldn't come in the nation, especially under Mr. Elijah Muhammad, and be overweight. They would get on you. Okay. Matter of fact, Mr. Elijah Muhammad had scales. They would weigh you under Mr. Elijah Muhammad, from what old timers told me. They would weigh you to see if you weighing properly other than yourself.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very quickly, provide triggers for evolution. Ask the question: was there a process of mental decolonization from a political and economic perspective?
Well, they were industrious under Mr. Elijah Muhammad. They had, like I said, they had 46 independent schools. They had businesses all throughout the country. They had supermarkets. They had steak and takes. They had cleaners. They had a bunch of things going on.
So very quickly, provide triggers for evolution. When you say decolonization, what do you mean by that? Can if you could in the chat break down what do you mean by decolonization from a political and economic perspective? Appreciate that. So let's go into funding. We're talking about the contemporary funding of the Nation of Islam. Now, from what I've read, particularly in the book Inside the Nation of Islam, it's Inside the Nation of Islam by Wilbert L. White Jr., a former member, a high-ranking member of the nation. He talks about that there's an expectation under the leadership of Louis Farrakhan that members give 60% of their income.
Well, when I was under Minister Farrakhan, that came after I left. I left Minister Farrakhan in 1991. Okay. So I missed that boat, but he did. They still wanted you to pay your dues. You had to sell a certain amount of papers. You had to pay your number 2 poor. You had to pay FOI dues, all that stuff. But that 60%, I wasn't in there when they implemented that 60%.
Let me ask you this question: how much are FOI dues, and how many times a month or a week or a year do you have to pay them?
It was, if I remember, it was $5 a week. Okay. The FOI dues were like $5 a week, and the number 2 poll, you paid what you could pay. And when I was in there, I can't speak what happened after that. Okay. I can only speak when I was in there.
Okay. What about the $1 billion development plan?
I don't see that being implemented.
Okay. And the 3-year economic plan?
Okay, I seen it. Well, from what I seen, from what I read out of when I went to the Logan Square Library and saw the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, they were implementing that. They were importing fish from Peru. They was in let me see, import export business. The Nation of Islam was in the import export under Elijah Muhammad.
Right.
But Mr. Farrakhan had came out with these clean and fresh products.
Yes, I'm familiar with
clean
that.
and fresh. And I was a distributor, and I couldn't really sell it because a lot of people were complaining about the prices.
Very good. Provide Trigger states decentering all Western imperialist and oppressive worldviews vis-a-vis the African American population. That's what it means by decolonizing from a political and economic perspective.
Oh, what you mean, far as the Nation of Islam decolonizing?
Yeah, decolonizing from a political and economic perspective.
Well, he got us to, that we were supposed to support our own people. I mean, if you read the economic blueprint, he said we don't boycott black businesses. Mm-hmm. So he advocated that we support our own people and support our own businesses.
Right. So, and I'm glad you.
So, if you look at
very quickly, because in the book by Wilbur L. White Jr., there was a time where he was a small Black-owned business owner in Cincinnati. And he talks about the fact that he did business with the Nation of Islam, and they refused to actually pay him.
So yeah, I believe that. Yeah, I heard the stories like that under. I heard. Yeah, that's.
We don't want to talk over each other. Let's not talk over each other.
Okay.
So he talked about that some of the rhetoric regarding supporting Black businesses did not align with the actual actions of the organization. For example, many would argue that people join the Nation of Islam and they learn how to become what? Entrepreneurial, to become industrialists in nature. However, what we find, particularly when we talk about the newspaper, which under the leadership of Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X was known as Muhammad Speaks, and now it's known as the Final Call, that members, the rank and file, have to purchase newspapers. They have to purchase them themselves, and that when they're selling them on the street, they're trying to make their money back. And one of the ways to rise in prominence in a particular study group or mosque is to be able to sell newspapers at a high rate. So this is in itself a situation that isn't actually beneficial to the members because they're actually purchasing the newspaper with their own paycheck and then trying to make their money back. The same as when they had the fish company, right? The members were actually purchasing the fish and then trying to sell the fish really, on the street. Right, so we find that many are arguing, of course, Wilbur L. White Jr., who was a minister of the mosque here in Columbus in the 1990s, argues that the elite of the organization actually financially and economically exploit the rank and file.
That's true. That's facts.
Could you elaborate on that?
Well, it was one incident where Farrakhan supposed to have been trying to get back the home that Elijah Muhammad lived in, the mansion that Farrakhan now lives in now.
You're talking about
on Stony Island. Yes, when he was trying to get to school. I remember when I came in, he said, if you don't pay $1,000, you'll get put out. He put a lot of pressure on people with that. I remember that pressure. If you don't pay $1,000, you get put out.
Did you pay it?
Yeah, I paid majority of it.
Okay.
But he actually didn't kick nobody. I guess it was a tactic to make people come up with some money. But I felt the pressure. I'm going to be honest with you. I was under a lot of pressure.
When you say you felt the pressure, could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
I mean, I had my rent I had to pay. A lot of things I had to pay. And I had sacrificed not paying certain things I should have been paying. I paid that situation.
Okay. Okay, Kevin, aka Mr. K, and we're going to bring everybody in a minute. The link is in the description. I'll put the link in the chat momentarily. Kevin, aka Mr. K, states in February 1965, issue of Saturday Evening Post, ex-NOI member Aubrey Barnett described the Nation of Islam's business enterprise back in the 60s as an extortion racket.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. He was.
Wait, very quickly. Drewski says, no, he never did that. The mosque is on Stolen Island, not the house. So once again, I think you're conflating. He's speaking about the home and not the mosque, right? We know where the mosque is located. We also are aware of Final Call building, which is on 79th Street. The other issue here is he did talk about do that because it's talked about in this book, Inside the Nation of Islam, like by Vilbert L. White Jr., who is a former minister and head of the Columbus Mosque, which is now a study group. So this is something that took place.
Yes,
Go
it
right
did.
ahead, brother.
I was there. I'm not going by what somebody told me. I was there. Yep. So yeah, but yeah, that was the pressure. You know what I mean? You had to get to school and the temple. You know, he was trying to get all that back. You know, and he did get some of those things back.
So let's talk about the University of Islam. So let's talk about the university, the curriculum. So I've had the luxury of speaking with individuals who were former students of the University of Islam. And one of the things they shared with me was that they were pretty shocked regarding the curriculum, right? We're familiar with the work of the late, great father of Black history, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and his seminal text, Miseducation Negro, which was written in 1933. But we also find, according to numerous students that I spoke to, that instead of receiving the African-centered curriculum, they were receiving a Eurocentric and Arab-centered curriculum. What are your thoughts on those comments?
Well, because
the University of Islam,
I'm gonna say it like this. I always say this to people: the Nation of Islam has teachings that's healing mixed up with poison. A lot of the teachings have anti-African sentiments in it.
This is very true.
And the reason why, because the founder of the NOI, he was a foreigner, which I learned later. I thought he came from Mecca, but he really came from India. And some of those teachings have caste system sentiments in it. Right.
Yeah, this is very true. Elijah Muhammad talks about, I believe, in one of his books, it's either Fall of America or
Fall of America, page 150. Right. The only one civilized in Africa are Christians and Muslims. That's on page 150, Fall of America.
He says the rest of the people that live in Africa live a jungle.
Yes, he said they're savages.
Right, they're savages. So,
and another thing, he had an article or that people in the Nation of Islam cannot wear African clothes,
right?
Nor can they marry African women.
Right, Kevin, aka Minister K. You're absolutely on point there. In Hakeem Jamal's book, it mentioned how Malcolm told him how the NOI's businesses were in the red, but H.L. Hunt's money prevented those businesses from folding. And very quickly, I'm going to actually grab that book and I'm going to actually read an excerpt from the book, because a lot of people say, well, you need to provide the page number, so on and so forth. So give me 1 second, family. I'm going to bring that up. Okay, very good. Give me 1 second. So this is, of course, in the book, The Judas Factor, The Plot to Kill Malcolm X. 1 second, family. Is it 206 here? 1 second. Okay. Yes, finally, and perhaps coincidentally, it was shortly after John Ali became National Secretary of the sect in 1960 that the Nation of Islam began receiving contributions from Texas multimillionaire H.L. Hunt. Right. So let's go very quickly. One more. It's going to be 284 to 286. Okay. 284 to 286. Let me see here. Okay. Malcolm X said, have been depositing contributions from this phone. Let's see here. Okay. When Bradley and Jamal, okay. Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X said, and I'm on page 284, family, of The Judas Factor, The Plot to Kill Malcolm X. Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X said, have been depositing contributions from his followers. D1 Beast, what's the word, brother? I hope you hit the thumbs up button. Just kill that algorithm today. Malcolm X said had been depositing contributions from his followers in a secret bank account in Switzerland, and his wife had been doing the same in accounts she held in Beirut and Cairo. Although the Nation of Islam received hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations each year, Malcolm X said that accounting books he examined in the messenger's office revealed that the Nation of Islam was spending far more cash than the followers were contributing. When Bradley and Jamal inquired about how this was possible, Malcolm X's reply hit them like a bombshell. There's a Texas multimillionaire who supports not only Elijah Muhammad, but the Minuteman in the John Birch Society, Malcolm X said. His name is H.L. Hunt. I think he is an oil. Have you ever heard of him? Bradley had, but Jamal had not. Hunt wasn't just a millionaire. He was a very racist, very right-wing spendthrift who was worth nearly $500 million in 1960. According to a lawsuit filed against him, he had once sold food that was unfit for human consumption, knowing that such sales would end up in Negro and lower-income areas. Hunt regarded African Americans as a threat to Caucasian control of American politics, as he made clear in numerous radio broadcasts and interviews. During a radio broadcast in mid-1960, Hunt exposed his abhorrence for African Americans. We are now in an area where whites, however free from racial prejudice, will be forced into the Republican Party by the Negro population, which will help control the National Democratic Party. So once again, family, when we talk about you want what? You want facts, you want evidence, you want the book, you want the page number, you want the source. This would be, of course, an example. So King David, one, I'm going to bring you in momentarily, brother. I'm going to bring you in momentarily. Brother Jay, if you're ready to tap in, you can think so. I think Carl Evans mentioned Hunt as well in his biography of Muhammad. Absolutely. So once again, family, this isn't slander. This isn't us misinformation. As I stated before, when you are truly interested in the liberation of African people at home and abroad, we understand that we have enemies that are internal as well as external. And one of the things we need to do is make sure we are critical of those who are closest to us, because as we know, skin folk isn't always kinfolk. And oftentimes, because the person looks like us and talks a good game, we allow individuals a pass. We give individuals a pass, right? And so, one of the things that Brother Wilbur L. White Jr. talked about in his text was that he implored the members of the Columbus Mosque, go to college, study business, study history, and get an education, because we know individuals who are intellectually indolent are the most easily manipulated.
That's true.
Right. And so that's why we're doing this. And so, matter of fact, I can recall I actually had a phone conversation with a member of the Nation of Islam, particularly regarding the $1 billion development plan. And in this conversation, he shared with me that this development plan would fund the several businesses of the Nation of Islam. We're talking about Muhammad's Farms, Shabazz Restaurant, so on and so forth. And I said, okay, if I contribute this money, will I be allowed to, would I receive a dividend from the profits of this business? So I said, because I own stock. That's how a business works. If you provide capital for a business, you receive a dividend, whether it be quarterly, semi-annual, annually, from the dividends of the business. The brother stated to me, no, that's not how it works. I said, well, brother, enlighten me. How does it work? He says, what we believe is that we would give the money to Farrakhan and he would do the right thing with it. And I said, well, what the French toast is going on? That doesn't even benefit the members of the organization. So how would that benefit the masses of African Americans living in the death, decadence, and dysphoria of the United States of America? I said, that's nonsensical. And he said, well, brother, it seems nonsensical to you because you just don't have enough blind faith. But I said, just from a business standpoint, if someone is providing capital for a business, the expectations that you receive a return on your investment.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the reality.
I have to tell you, the Nation of Islam, I'm gonna tell you the truth. It's a dictatorship. That's what it is. It's a dictatorship. No checks and balances. The leadership doesn't get checked. People, just the followers, just hear and obey. That's what that is. It's a dictatorship.
All right, so to Drewski and Low Key, hey, you got my platform. Send a link to Dr. Wesley Muhammad. I'm gonna look him up myself and get him on here. And we're gonna have a part 2 to this. But once again, what I do not allow is misinformation on my platform. You can have your, so matter of fact, because we're about to start bringing people in, so let me make sure I go over this. So here are some of the rules here at Lumumba Speaks and Be Quiet Network. Diversity of thought is welcome, right? So you could be on the left, you could be on the right, or you could be right down the middle, no problem. No epithets of any kind are allowed on my platform. No racial epithets of any kind. If you use a racial epithet, you'll be immediately booted out. I don't play those type of games. This is a site of Black empowerment. So we're going to respect ourselves as African people. We know 3 years of Black power is what? Self-respect, self-defense, and of course, self-determination. So no epithets of any kind towards anyone. Number 3, facts over feelings. So what does that mean? We don't engage in ad hominems here. No ad hominem attacks. You got to attack the argument, not the person. I say Black Power. And then number 4, no fundamentally false statements. You can have an opinion, but you can't make a claim that is false. For example, some people believe Michael Jordan's the GOAT. Some people believe LeBron James is the GOAT. That's an opinion. But if you were to say, well, Jordan's the GOAT because LeBron only won 2 championships, that's a fundamentally false statement. If you were to say LeBron was the GOAT because Jordan never led the league in scoring, that's a fundamentally false statement, right? And last but not least, our mission here at Lumumba Speaks is either to exonerate or vilify, but to challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has previously been accepted as fact. King David, the one, what's the word?
Peace, and Black Power family. How we doing?
I'm doing quite all right.
Doing fine, my brother. Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Pleasure's mine. So I'm kind of coming in the middle of everything. But if I were to address the topic and title of the video, is what Nation of Islam, cult or community?
Yes.
Right. So I look at it like this, right? Because I'm an FOI myself. I'm just not active as it's called, but you know, certain things that stick with you forever, like riding the bike, right? So in terms of it being a cult, something that I noticed, and it's not just the Nation of Islam, it could just be anything that's outside of the American norm that enforces discipline. Anything that enforces discipline and a consistency, it can be called a cult, especially if a religious aspect is involved. I give you another example of they won't call themselves this, but no disrespect to any Hebrews who might be in the room, but because of the theological attachment it has to the Bible and things like that, I'll call it a religious institution.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew Israelites, you know, it's something in religion or a dedication to living according to theological text that produces discipline in people. It's something about that, right? Because I look at it like this.
If I could, I would disagree. For example, when we talk about child sexual abuse, and this is a taboo subject, particularly in the African American community, the second largest purveyor of child sexual abuse is religious institutions in the United States of America. Right? So the concept and idea of discipline, it sounds good, but the reality is something I would argue is completely different. But when we talk about a cult, there are some core tenets of a cult. One of those core tenets, and I actually brought it up, and I'm going to share my screen so we could go over that, because this isn't something that's just rooted against religion in terms of if someone is a practitioner of a particular religion, that they somehow are a cult. But authoritarianism, the leader's word is law and there is no accountability. No tolerance for questions or criticism. Doubts or questions are punished. Unreasonable fears. Followers may fear the outside world, such as impending catastrophe, evil conspiracies, or persecutions. Belief about former followers. Followers may believe that former followers are always wrong for leaving and that there is no legitimate reason to leave. Beliefs about the leader. Followers may believe that the leader is always right and that the leader is the exclusive means of knowing truth or receiving validation. Abuse. Cults may have a history of physical or psychological abuse of their members. Financial disclosure. Cults may not provide meaningful financial disclosures regarding their budgets or expenses. Isolation. Cults may isolate their members from friends and family on the outside. Cults may require followers to make inordinate sacrifices and give money. Indoctrination. Cults may use rituals or study sessions to draw followers in to get them to adopt new worldview that requires new behaviors. Now, one of the issues I take umbrage with, particularly when we talk about cults, is that even when individuals are provided factual information, they still go off what they were told by the leader, right? And this is what we know and call menticide, right? I deal with this with a lot of my students in college, to where even when you provide them with factual information, they still go off what they were told, because the belief is more important than factual information. The mental side, by definition, is the inability to engage in critical thinking, critical or independent thinking, right? And in many cults, independent thinking isn't allowed. That was one of the issues that caused a schism with Malcolm leaving, was there was a lack of an ability to engage in independent thinking. So those type of things, I would argue, are problematic.
Well,
right?
okay. So let me put more flesh on what I was saying now. When black people in an organized fashion dedicate themselves to a movement that is rooted in black liberation theology as a means of coping, dealing with, and combating the system of white supremacy, that it produces a militancy in them, especially when you see when you got a whole nation of people with you that's on the same type of time. We all showing up for the same cause. It's kind of like a whatever organization it is. It's kind of like a glimpse of our world post the rule of white supremacy. You know,
Right.
because that's the thing that white supremacy tries to prevent is black unity, black organization. Right, like real black organization, everybody being on code with each other. But I just always look at what the thing produces, like whatever it is. And that's the main thing that attracted me to the Nation of Islam back in 2015. I mean that had always really attracted me to it, but I just the stars just so happened to line up the right way, and I found the right people, and I just ended up jumping into the ranks. But you know, and I mean, and then on top of, you know, just the teaching that, you know, the black man or the black nation is God, you know what I mean? Like that's that there as the teaching, and then I heard what the teaching was, and then I saw what it produced, and how it made the followers move. I'm like, well, shit, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm looking for right there. You know, and again, just the enforcement of discipline, living a clean life. You know, all of that things being, and that's not to say obviously nobody's perfect, because if it was perfect, there would be no discrepancies, right? But I heard Dr. Khaled once say, when you come to the Nation of Islam, you got to look at it like a hospital. When you go to the hospital, you're going to find sick people. You're not going to find everybody healthy in the hospital. You're going to find people that need some type of treatment, people who need a cure. So you
Right.
might find a brother in the Nation of Islam or a sister in the Nation of Islam here and there that might say something silly. That's kind of off code. Like, what? You know what I'm saying? But
if I can interject, but that's one of the points. I'm glad you brought that up, because I've had this conversation with numerous people that one of the issues we find with the nation, I've had this critique of the Black Panther Party, us organizations, so on and so forth, is that these organizations tend to rely on people who aren't well educated, who lack ability to engage in critical thinking, because they're easy to manipulate and mold. Right. So, for example, I went to a NOI meeting back in May. I asked the brother, I said, "Hey, brother, why do you refer to yourself as the Asiatic black man?" He said, "Well, that's because at one point, brother, the whole world was called, the whole entire continental landmass, when it was one, was called Asia." I said, "That's not true." I said, "There wasn't a landmass, and it wasn't called Asia until Herodotus did so during 400 BCE, where he coined that term for the landmass east of the Aegean Sea." So what are you talking about? You're just making stuff up because it's what you were told. So that's one. I mean, you know this. I'm gonna have my PhD next month. One of the issues is people are going off and they're being told one thing, they don't, and it's not true, and they believe it. That's a problem. That's a problem. To be providing information in training that is 100% farcical. That's a problem. Because as I tell my children, if somebody is telling you something that's not true, they are trying to manipulate you. There may be some fringe benefit, but the end goal is to manipulate you.
Oh, can I elaborate? Can I elaborate on that too, if you don't mind?
Please.
This is my personal experience. I remember when you ever heard of Dr. Malefi Asante?
I'm familiar with Dr. Malefi Asante.
Well, he invited.
I have several of his books behind me.
Okay, he invited. I remember this like it was yesterday. He invited Dr. Khalid Muhammad to speak at the universities, and I remember this vividly. He asked Dr. Khalid Muhammad about that Asiatic black man pseudo. It's pseudo, okay, and Khalid Muhammad didn't really respond to that. You know what I'm saying? But at the time, you know what I'm saying, I was a blind. I didn't question it because, you know, I was sucked in. I was so caught up in the moment at the time. But years later I did the research and found out that Asiatic is a Greek word. It's not even indigenous.
Right.
And if you know history, the indigenous people of Asia and Africa and all those areas, they never named the whole continent.
Right, they didn't. That's correct.
Okay, that was by the invaders. The invaders named the continent.
Right. So these are some of the issues. Matter of fact, when I went to the meeting, this is back in May, the brother said, well, you know, Abraham was a black man. One, even Jewish scholars have admitted that Abraham was a mythological person. He never actually existed. Secondly, according to the biblical text, Abraham came from the city-state of Ur, which is in present-day Iraq, which is what make him Akkadian. So, right, and we know the ancient Egyptians, the Kemites, brothers and sisters from Kemet, provided detailed descriptions of the phenotypical appearance of people from that area of the world. So it's like they just make claims that are what? Patently false. But someone who's educated like me, I can't take you serious. But someone who doesn't know anything, right? They would eat that up, hook, line, and sinker. So these are some of the issues. Making a claim that Islam, matter of fact, the brother stated that Islam, there's anti-blackness in Islam, but that's only because white people became involved in it. Completely false. If you know anything about the history of Islam has been anti-black since its inception. Right? I know this because I minored in religion in college. I have a master's degree in African studies. I took 4 courses on the history of Islam in grad school. It's like, I'm like, what are you talking about? You're just making stuff up, and people believe you because they don't know any better.
And then another thing
That's
I found.
That's a problem, because what's going to happen is when you actually go and get in contact with somebody who knows what they're talking about, guess what's going to happen? You're either going to say, like Christians do, you're lost, you don't know what you're talking about, or guess what? It's like the dating show. You can pop the balloon, and all that self-esteem you had is going to be deflated when you realize you've been taught a bunch of misinformation.
I'll push back against that. Only because this is and this is one of the things that made the teachings real distinct, is when, particularly in the nation, when someone says Muslim or Islam, it's not making reference to the institution of Islam. And I believe the other brother on the call knows this. The other brother David on the call. Is it David or Donald? I'm sorry.
Brother Daniel. Brother Daniel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Brother Daniel, I'm pretty sure you are familiar with this teaching. Is that Islam, all it means is complete submission to the will of God, right?
Right.
And in theological, in the theological text, and I'm saying that because, you know, some of us don't believe in God or whatever, right?
Right.
So be that as it may. So just tally that. But when a Muslim, particularly in the Nation of Islam, says Islam, it means complete submission to the will of God. Now, if you're thinking God is from time immemorial to time immemorial, eternal, right? So that order was here long before there was any Muhammad or any Quran or any organized religion called Islam. So when the one brother that you talked to said Islam became corrupted with other white supremacy when white people got involved in it. So that could be what that means. And even Elijah Muhammad.
Well, no, but but here's the thing. I asked him, and he said he was referring to the religion of Islam. I asked him. Right. The second issue is the claim is that Islam is the original religion of black people. Anyone who studied African history knows that that's ahistorical. right?
Now,
Because in traditional African culture, what? There's the God is not polytheistic, but it's animist.
yes, it was in animism.
Where there's a belief that God is in all living things, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like, I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, I actually went to school for this stuff. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're making, like I said, the issue is the fact that the claims they're making are patently false. There's no way around that. That's the problem.
Can I elaborate on something that he touched on? He was saying that it got corrupted when white people joined. But Mr. Elijah Muhammad said that Muhammad from 1400 years ago, so-called Prophet Muhammad, was a white man.
So, I mean, so yeah, once again, the link is in the chat. Brother Dialogue Kenyatta, I know you always say cults don't cultivate, but the link is in the chat. I put the link in the chat once again. The link is also in the description. Tap in, be part of the conversation. So, but as I said before, miseducation is miseducation. Falsifying history is falsifying history, irrespective of who does it. Right? We find this in the black church. We find this in the mosque. This is a problem, irrespective of who does it. Right? When we talk about being African-centered, so on and so forth, that doesn't mean that you have the right to propagate misinformation just because it's your beliefs. It's still false. Right?
Yeah,
it's a problem.
There's a contradiction. I remember when I came in the nation, they said Islam is not a religion. It's your nature or your way of life. But when you read the Quran, it says it calls it a religion. It says, this day I saved my favor on you. I perfected your religion, Islam. It calls it a religion in the Quran.
No, it says
that's the contradiction in the discrepancy.
It said, I give it to you as a religion.
It's still mentioned it as a religion. If you say as a religion, it's still a religion.
Nah, not necessarily. Not necessarily. That's just like that. No. Look, that's just like say if somebody gives you a shirt, right? And instead of using it as a shirt, you use it as just like a towel to cover you or something like that. Like, look, this is this, but I'm giving it to you as that. You understand? Because part of why it is prescribed as a religion is because people have fallen from their nature. So therefore, you need a book. You know what I'm saying? If you fallen off from something, you lost the knowledge of something. Well, shit. Here you go as a reminder. Do it this way.
So very quickly, let me tap in, and I'm gonna give it to Brother Kenyatta. So here's one of the issues when they talk about this concept of Islam being the original religion for Black people. When we talk about, when you study traditional African religions, which I have, traditional African religions don't have prophets. They don't have revealed scriptures. The concept of salvation is not individualistic, right? Traditional African religions don't believe in proselytizing, right? So these are things that are inherently antithetical to traditional African culture. By traditional African culture, I mean African culture independent of European and Arab influence. That's why I stated that irrespective of how you paint it, the word salad one uses, the claims are patently false. There's no way around it.
So what do you call the meta?
Once again, we're talking about classical. We're talking about classical Africa, right? And you're getting into Mott, so on and so forth. But what we find is that there wasn't a belief in what? Proselytizing, having what we like to call imperialistic religions.
And another thing I want to elaborate, in African traditional spiritual systems, they don't even have a concept of a devil. That came with the Abrahamic spiritual system.
That's very true. That's very true as well.
Okay. And then another thing, in African traditional spiritual systems, a woman could be hold high position as a priestess. Where in Islam, a woman can't be any man.
Right. A great example is that we saw that even during the Haitian Revolution, when Bookman and the sister, when they had their voodoo ceremony, they both took part in the ceremony. They both led the ceremony. So we see this concept of the equality of the man and the woman in traditional African religious spiritual beliefs. Right. We even find in traditional African, for example, traditional African culture, women weren't seen as less than. right?
That's right.
Women and men, they work.
We're equal. They're considered equal.
They work together with each other. Great example. I always give this example of in European culture when Joan of Arc said she had a premonition from God, and we know that's a whole conversation from another day, to take up arms and defend her nation or country. When they found out she was a man, they said she was accused of heresy and blasphemy, and she was burned at the stake. Now we talk. Let's juxtapose this to traditional African culture. The last war of resistance against the British on the Gold Coast, now known Ghana. Jan Santawa, when some of the men were willing to capitulate and turn over the golden stool to the British supposed governor, she said no. She challenged their manhood and said, you should exchange your loincloths for my undergarments. They said, you know what? Not only are you right, we're going to make you leader of the war council. So we see once again that even the religion in itself is incongruent with our culture.
That's right.
Why I said the only way that these things work is if you aren't actually knowledgeable of your own history, heritage, and culture. Then someone can tell you this stuff and you believe it. That's the problem.
Another thing about traditional African spiritual systems or sacred science, it's diametrically opposed to Islam. All the Abrahamic faiths, they're not in alignment with that. Okay, in traditional sacred science or African spiritual systems, you not only are the deities are masculine, you have feminine deities. It's a balance. All the deities are not masculine, but if you study the Abraham religion, the deity is all masculine.
Right.
There's no balance.
So very quickly, okay, go right ahead.
My fault. I'm gonna be real short, and this isn't necessarily to combat brother Donald, but maybe help you refine your point. Are you sure you want to say diametrically opposed to Abrahamic religion?
Yes, it is.
I would say that from the Africans. Hold on, wait, real quick. From the African Center scholars I've read, but we're talking about Ali Missouri from Kenya. He wrote the book "The Africans and Triple Heritage" in 1986. We're talking about Molefi K. Asante. Matter of fact, he provides a vociferous critique, Africans and the Critique of Islam, in his book Afrocentricity that was written in 1980. Right. So there are numerous scholars that have provided an African-centered critique of Islam that highlight. Matter of fact, I don't know if I'm gonna find the book right on time. That highlight the how the religion is antithetical to African culture. Like I said, once again, I can say this because I'm in the academy and I know the research and the literature. But once again, this is an example of what happens when, and I even tell my students this. I say, when you take my course, this is probably one of the only times in your life that you will receive instruction from an African-centered frame of reference, not a Christian frame of reference, not a nationalistic frame of reference, not from an Islamic frame of reference, but from a African-centered frame of reference, right? And so when he says diametrically opposed, I've done the research, I've done the right, I've took the courses. That is not subterfuge. That is not hyperbole. He is being 100% factual. Okay.
Only reason why I asked about using the phrase diametrically opposed is because you got many of our great African scholars who would suggest that the Abrahamic religions come from African spirituality.
Yes. So many scholars would argue that they influence. So, for example, when we talk about the concept of the Day of Judgment, we find this, of course, in Mott. When we talk about the concept of there being a virgin birth, that comes out of ancient Egypt. The concept of justice. We talk about your name being written in the book of life. Real quick, I'm gonna let you jump in. So we see many of these concepts influencing, right? But the religions in themselves, for example, we talk about being diametrically opposed. So we know in traditional African culture, alcohol was used as a way to pour libation for weddings, so on and so forth. But in Islam, alcohol is haram, right? And in traditional African culture, you can have as many wives as you can financially support. But in Islam, it caps it at 4. In traditional African culture and society, you're given an African name, that promotes cultural affirmative action. There's a meaning to that name, and oftentimes you're named after a great ancestor or a member of the family. But typically, from an Islamic standpoint, guess what happens? You're given an Islamic name, which is really an Arabic name, right? And in Islam, the belief is that when people die, when everyone goes to heaven, they all speak Arabic, right? So those are examples. But Kenyatta, go right ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity and the invite. First thing I want to do is express my extreme gratitude and appreciation for this topic. And this is something that's absolutely necessary. I call this devangelism because African people have been evangelized, and our religion, as much as our economic state and our outlook and value systems, are a byproduct of colonization and enslavement. And anything that came through us through conquest is illegitimate. And it's time we had those difficult conversations. Ain't no such thing as halfway liberation. But to the fallacies that these are offshoots or somehow products of African spiritualities because you can find overlaps and similarities. Listen, these alien, colonial, hostile religions come out of Africa or a product of African spirituality to the extent that excrement is the outcome of food. You know, it's our culture that has been consumed, digested, and processed through an alien hostile process. And you'll find it very peculiar that all the people that talk about the African origins of Christianity, the African origins of Islam, or even the African origins of Judaism, they never tend to embrace the original, because the original is still with us. Mm-hmm. The indigenous philosophies, the indigenous scrolls, the hieroglyphics, the negative confessions. So if you know that it's the original. If someone says, well, American democracy is a byproduct of Greco-Roman democracy, it has very little similarities. And Greco-Roman democracies and their writings and scrolls are still here. So if you really wanted to use that as a justification. So to me, that's an illegitimate justification for adhering to the back. And there's a difference between your offspring and a mutation. A mutation is something, your offspring is something you give birth to and something you nurture, cultivate. Whereas a mutation is something that is, number one, outside of your control, and that happens over generations, over an extended period of time. These alien, hostile, anti-human systems are mutations of our cultures and our ancestors. They are not offspring. Our ancestors did not create or cultivate or create or deliberately seek to have these outcomes. So you are not honoring or continuing African traditions. And I always say they're just draping a kente cloth over an anti-African value system. So I don't think because you can find some overlap between African Orisha or some other African deity or some ancient African philosophy that is attuned with Christianity or Islam, or you can find some story about a flood or some anointed prophet, and just because you can find those little connections is not a justification of for you to be dealing with the digested and excreted when you have access to the fruit from the tree. And why are you going to take something someone else has consumed and digested and put out to you when you could get it from the source, when you can get it from the seed? It makes no rational sense.
I think that's a good point. That is an argument that must go right ahead.
Real quick, not to cut you off. Are you going to part two of this conversation?
Yes, I could part to it.
Okay, if you part to it. Now look, I want to go on the record saying this because I don't like when other people do this. All right, look, I was on my way to my brother's house when I jumped on this and got the notification, so I don't want y'all to think, oh, the brother running. Okay. I don't get out like that, but I was already en route for something else. But okay. I do appreciate the information and the perspective being shared. And if you part through this and let me know what date, I'll set time and we can okay.
I would try to maybe get it for next Sunday. The brother said to reach out to Wesley Muhammad. And I would do that. And I would do that. Sure. Once again, as I said before, like many people say, well, you're a Pan-Africanist, it's a Pan-Africanist platform. So why are you having such a critique of a Black organization? As I said before, our enemies are internal as well as external. And one of the issues that we find is that because these people look like us, we tend to not have our guard up. Right? And so we have to be cognizant of that. And one of the major issues I have with the nation, one, is the financial exploitation of the rank and file members. And then number two, the fact that they are promoting knowledge of self, which is actually misinformation. and pseudo history. That's a problem, particularly for someone like me who's in the profession and I teach history for a living. African American history, right? African history. That's a problem because what it means is they're cheapening my profession. They're cheapening my discipline.
Oh, I wanted to touch this.
I mean, that is a personal, specific note, but that is an issue.
All right.
One of the disagreements that Malcolm had with the nation also, he didn't like the anti-African sentiments of the Nation of Islam also, because he was raised as a Garveyite. His family were Garveyites, okay? And that was one of the conflicts he was dealing with in the NOI, was the anti-African sentiments.
Oh, yeah, we even find that in Islam itself, in most mosques and masjid. Matter of fact, Brother Bawana says when the boy get his PhD, listen, we're looking to schedule my dissertation defense for the second week of September. So just be on the lookout for that. I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna seek to broadcast it live here on my platform, my dissertation defense. But one of the issues that we find, even in just Islam as a whole, not even the nation, that oftentimes wearing African clothing is prohibited in the mosque.
Wearing braids is prohibited.
Right. We know in the Quranic schools, the children are typically physically abused and forced to recite the Quran from memory, even though they don't even know what they're reciting because they don't actually speak Arabic. There is a large history of sexual abuse of children in these religious institutions. Right, this is not something that we should be embracing.
Yeah,
right?
I'm gonna drop this on. This is a true story. When I was in the Navy, I was a TAD in Bahrain, and we had a sister. She was from the Caribbean. She had braids. You know, them Arab women try to pull her hair out. We had to push her. We had to defend her and get her away from them.
Mm. Wow. Brother D1 Beats, what's the word?
Yeah, I'm a little late because I'm at work right now, but I'm just listening along, stuff like that.
Okay, you're in the BX, right? Is the BX of Brooklyn? Which one?
No, I'm in Queens.
Queens, okay, all right. Queens, get the money. I got you.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to hop in real quick because I missed you. I missed
faking it.
Well, yeah, I mean that is what Chaos once said.
Who you quote?
Originally, I was born in Brooklyn, though.
Woo!
Yes,
he did.
It ain't cool giving money. Please keep on faking it.
Listen, he said from Hollis to Hollywood. He said from Hollis to Hollywood. All right, so I'm gonna let him have that.
I mean, you're talking about accurate history here. You can't.
I'm glad we brought that up because we do know that today is the 51st birthday of hip hop.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an innocent plug, but today is hip hop turns 51 years old today, and so we definitely want to give a great thanks to hip hop, which of course is a subculture of African American culture, and we are aware of the aspects of hip hop, which are, of course, what breaking, DJing, MCing, graffiti, and of course the clothing. Right, so definitely want to give a shout out to that. Aaron Muhammad says, has anyone on the side of the criticism of the Nation of Islam read any books of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? Yes, I have.
I did too. I read all the books. I read all the books.
Muhammad, you're free to come in, tap in, and be part of the conversation. You do not have to come up if you do not want to. Keyword, you do not have to come up if you do not want to. The link is in the description. I will put the link in the chat. You can tap in and be part of the conversation if you so please.
And another thing,
to be transparent, I have it myself though.
Go ahead. We didn't just talk about the negative aspect. We also talked about the positive aspect of the NOI.
So I'm quite sure, but Kenyana's going to disagree with that.
Okay.
Go right ahead. You got to turn your mic on, though. Yeah, you're still muted. Oh, snap.
I missed the positive aspects.
So he talked about imposing discipline, being cognizant of your appearance, things of that nature.
I got that in Catholic school. How's that? How is that a counter to our oppression? And especially since you can get that in reform school. I'm not sure, based on everything, as much as African have given Islam, I don't think we've ever gotten anywhere near a fair trade-off. And I don't really call that a positive experience because, to quote my old Christian Baptist uncle, sin is not what you do, but the spirit in which you do it. So you can't just look at something and interpret it as positive when you don't comprehend the motivation or rationale behind it. So if I'm upright and erect and clean and disciplined based on some supernatural, irrational, baseless position or claim, then ultimately that good thing I'm doing cannot be defined as good. The fucking Nazis were well dressed and had proper and very articulate.
This is
So what is the ultimate goal?
I think
the Nation of Islam is also an apocalyptic cult.
Yeah, that's like Hitler was a vegetarian.
Right, yeah, and I'm a vegan. And you look at my motivations for veganism versus Hitler. Hitler had a great public health policy and, environmental policy. Exactly. So again, going back to my Baptist uncle, sin is not what you do, but the spirit in which you do it. So you can't describe to me appropriate or positive behaviors when the rationale, the justification, the motivations are irrational, corrupt, baseless. So I can't give that to them. I mean, when I went to Catholic school, we had a very strict dress code and code of conduct, and the Pope had us doing that.
Once again, family, if you're watching, make sure you hit the thumbs up
button. Besides that, because I love the bean pies.
Oh well, I wanted to touch on the Islam piece. The brother tried to say that the Africans was in the Islam, but he don't understand. The ones that had converted to Islam, they had conflict with the Africans who was sticking to animism, sticking to the original teachings.
Yeah, and Arabized Africans have been a pox on the continent for centuries. Arabized Africans. To this day, I'm going back and forth with Arabized Africans.
Okay.
So again, when we look at the concrete history, if we read the journalism and research of Samuel Cotton, Arabized African, again, that's not a source for justification or motivation for our embrace of an alien imperialist hostile presence within our communities or on our continent.
And if I can add, when Islam first entered Africa, it was through conquest. It wasn't through anything peaceful or something like that. It was through conquest. So
when it first entered Africa, it was coming. Africa, if you look at the Christian king of Abyssinia, Africa actually provided refuge.
Right. To Muhammad and his followers.
No, I'm not talking about that period. I'm talking about when after.
Right, but that's when it first
Muhammad
entered Africa rescued Islam, only for Islam to come back as a conqueror and a genocider.
Exactly.
And a colonizer. So it's even worse than just coming as a colonizer out the gate. You came back to your cradle. It's like a child returns to its home where it was nurtured and given shelter and given the necessity it needed to grow healthy, and coming back to burn that house down. So it's even worse than it just simply coming as a conqueror.
Yeah.
But the problem is that today is that most Africans who you try to bring that argument to, because I've tried to do this myself personally, they even reject that type of history, because even particularly from the West African perspective, they don't recognize that type of history that happened over in Egypt or Sudan or in Ethiopia, stuff like that. So they don't even recognize that type of history. And then that's even when it comes to the Nation of Islam aspect, which kind of is even disconnected overall from the Sunni Shia aspect. So you know what I'm saying? So that's why.
And I can recall in one of my courses, teaching African American history. And as you all know, I'm quite sure many of you have studied African American history, studied the work of Dr. John Hope Franklin, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, that based on their teachings, when you start teaching that, when you begin an African American history course, you begin with the African background. Why? Because our history didn't start here in America. And I made the students aware of the fact that if you start in America, you are reinforcing, and it's actually by your actions, stating that what white people said was right. We didn't have any history until they brought us here. So you start with the African background. So, and starting with the African background, we covered the history of anti-blackness from antiquity till today. So part of the history of anti-blackness is we focused on Islam. So a young lady said, "But I was raised Muslim, and I take an issue with what you're saying, and you could believe what you want to believe." And I said, first off, you ain't gonna be rolling your neck or talking to me like you crazy, right? I said, we don't do that here. So she said, "But I'm gonna go home and tell my parents what you said." I said, "Okay, fine." Not, it ain't like I'm making it up. I got the citations in the PowerPoint, right? She goes home and has a conversation with her parents. She comes back the next day for class and says, "I want to apologize to you because my parents told me that what you said was true, that Islam has been anti-Black since its inception." So I said, the real issue isn't the fact, the real question you should be asking is, you should be asking your parents, why didn't you all tell me this? Why did you?
Was that family Muslim?
Yes, I said, well, the question you should have is, why did your parents knowingly raise you to be a Muslim, even though they knew that the religion they were rearing you in has been anti-Black since its inception? I said, that's the question you need to be asking.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh.
I gotta say another thing I experienced. I had friends from the continent. That were Muslims, but they'd be practicing the indigenous stuff on the side.
Right.
They might be into Islam, but they might be into Ifa or Voodoo or Voodoo.
I think there was a brother named Benjamin. He put out a book recently over the last month. He was actually doing an interview with talking about that aspect. Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but once again, we're talking about an African center. Most African people throughout the world, we don't learn typically from an African center frame of reference. We learn from an Islamic frame of reference or a Christian frame of reference, not from an African center frame of reference. And that tends to be a problem. It creates what I would actually call identity dysphoria, right? So now you find African people saying, well, no, actually, we're the real Jews. We're Hebrew Israelites. We're the real Arabs, right? Because these religions pedestalize different ethnic groups and cultures. I remember one of my students shared with me, they said, well, Professor Lumumba, I think what we could do to solve some of the problems in the Black community is we should follow the Bible as a moral code. And I said, well, have you actually read the Bible? Because the Bible includes incest, pedophilia, bigotry, genocide, ethnic violence, settler colonialism. Where does it say that at? I give them all the chapters and verses.
Yeah,
I said, have you actually read the text for yourself? Or are you going off simply what you were told? And I said, matter of fact, we talked about very quickly, D1. We talked about this concept of manifest destiny. I'm quite sure the brothers and sisters who are watching are familiar with the concept of manifest destiny. This belief by the American government that God ordained westward expansion, the genocide of Native Americans, and the enslavement of African people because it was good for the nation state, right? And so I said, where do you think these Christian nationalists, when Christian nationalism is a derivative of white nationalism, where do you think they got this concept from? They said, well, humbug, I don't know. I said, the freaking Bible, right? That's what took place. It was Jewish nationalism, Jewish settler colonialism. We could show up to the land of Canaan, delete the people who live here, and claim the land as our own because we believe in the only real God.
Exactly.
And I would have to say this, though. Their colonialism and conquest predates Christianity. Their genocidal tendencies predate Christianity. Look at the Vikings. They weren't Christian. Yeah, they were arriving at the shores and hacking, and I have to remind Black folks all the time, they do this because they're white, not because we're Black.
Right.
So their God, when you look at, because I'm an atheist, but I understand and greatly value myths, folklore, legends, and even the concept of the supernatural and otherworldly. But when you look at people's concepts of the otherworldly, supernatural, their grand fiction, the gods that they create, you'll find that their gods represent the man more than man represents his God. So Zeus, if you look at Kronos, he was a cannibalistic predator. Like most of these gods.
Yeah, Zeus was a rapist.
Right. If most people because when people always come to me and it's like, yeah, people are fake Christians and these fake Muslims, I'm like, let's be thankful that we've got fake and inadequate Christians and Muslims, because
Right.
anybody who lived biblically or Quranically would be in an asylum or be
Or prison.
incarcerated.
Right.
So the problem is not the fact that you adhere to myths, folklore, legends, make believe. It's the fact that you adhere to a very, like you said, you guys pointed it all out. Sexism, violence, colonialism, conquest is at the core.
Mm.
They're gods. If you go back to Kronos, if you go back to the Bedouin nomadic polytheistic religions on the Arab Peninsula, and in Saudi, in Arabia, and the Persian and Southeast Asia. Even if you look at Hinduism, these are violent gods that were created by these people. And like you said, the feminine was demonized, if not erased. They either demonized the feminine or erased it. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. That's the holy, no feminine to be had. So even if you must indulge in the otherworldly supernatural, if you want to believe in extra dimensional universal forces intervening on your behalf, if you are engaged with them, you should know that they come from a culture, and when you subordinate yourself to these supernatural forces, you're actually subordinating yourself to a philosophy and a culture that is alien to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And even when you get quote unquote freedom, you're still enslaved.
And that's a great point. Dr. Ben talks about religion as the deification of a culture. I know there's other scholars that have argued that Jacob Carruthers, that religion is simply cultural nationalism on a religious level. Very quickly, Hood Haitian 305, shout out to 305. We use the term ethnic group, not tribe, here at Lumumba Speaks. So African ethnic groups, not tribes. And violence is human culture. That's the argument that Buddha Bawana is making. Tap in, be part of the conversation, Buddha Bawana. Hood Haitian 305, you can tap in as well.
Yeah, Lumumba.
Wait. Where's this? Wait, people are making these claims. They've been fighting each other since the beginning. What is he talking about? Number one, is he saying that to justify or somehow explain? Number one. Number two, where's this violence is human nature? Because when you look at the evolution of humanity, humans are some of the most empathetic creatures. And when you look at the evolution of human brains, human psychology, and human interpersonal interactions, we wouldn't have made it this far if our nature was violence. And I don't understand these dismissals, because they come off that philosophy. Man was born in sin. Man was born into darkness, and only through the light of divine light of Christ. Those again are Western concepts. Those are not African philosophies, and that is not the African experience. Perpetual, unrelenting warfare, orienting your technology, your scientific development, your entertainment, and your technology around warfare and conquest was not in Africa. And even if you look at the people who hate us, if you look at everything from the Greeks, the Romans, the British, the Portuguese, the Spaniards who came into Africa, all of them made the assertion that these people are soft. They don't understand warfare. The same thing they said when Columbus went into the New World. He was like, these people are so damn peaceful. They don't know avarice and violence. But now we're defining and looking at ourselves according to how other people defined us, as opposed to the examples and the history that our ancestors left for us.
So Buddha Bawana has a question. Name a time in human history when humans were not violent towards each other.
That is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the capacity for violence or occurrences of violence. We're talking on societal and cultural scale.
Okay.
So yeah, everybody has to. I'm a relatively peaceful person. Violence has been a part of my life, and I have the capacity for violence now.
Very good.
We're talking about on a societal and cultural scale. Every culture has had violence, but is that the engine of the society?
Right.
From a dialectical point, when you look at Western progress, when you look at Western culture, when you look at modern culture, every bit of technology from satellite radio, high speed, the rail system, Every component of their culture grows out of conquest and conflict. That is not the experience of African or so-called New World cultures. They weren't oriented toward perpetual warfare. They're not defined. Their historical epochs and their historical arcs are not defined by conflicts and war.
I got you. I can't let you monologue. Once again, if you're watching family, you're watching the dual stream with B Klein Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, the home of revolutionary African Center propaganda, and of course, LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. We're having a great discussion this evening. Make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Hit the notification bell. Sister Michelle, you've been waiting patiently. What say you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Hello, greetings, everyone. Greetings to the chat. Greetings to the panel. Let me see if I can make a comment and try to be as productive as possible, because I have two people in Lumumba and Brother Diallo who have very strong biases and beliefs, just like the religious people that they criticize. So my attempt here is
very quickly.
Okay.
I don't engage based on belief. Right, I move forward based on factual information from reputable sources. Right, so I don't do a belief thing. It's easier to believe than it is to think. Right, so when I make a claim, it's something that could be substantiated and verified.
You gonna leave me out of that, Lumumba?
All right, go right ahead.
You just defending yourself.
Very quickly, because it's my platform. I'm gonna give you a chance to provide a retort, but I just want to make you aware of that, sister. That my position on anything on my platform, I can't speak for other people, but on my platform is going to be based on factual information, right? So if I say, hey, Michael Jordan won 6 championships, it's because it's verifiable. I'm not going to say, well, I feel like Kobe won 6. No, I believe Kobe won 6. No, right? That's not the way I move. Just want to make that very clear. But
okay, so I'll see, you actually do have a belief, though, because there actually is scientific evidence for the proof of a God. And
wait, hold on, wait. So science is evidence-based, right? And you can't prove something that no one has ever seen.
You actually can prove things that people can't see. I can't see you breathing in and out, but I know that there's oxygen going in and out of your nose. But I can't see it with my eye.
But there's scientific evidence that oxygen exists.
Sight. There's more than one way to know something. But let me just.
Okay. Go ahead.
I want to try to be productive because I know you all are real firm in your beliefs, and I'm not.
Once again, we don't. This is not a belief thing, sister. It's not. That's not the way I operate. You see all these books behind me? This isn't a picture. This is real, right? Hold on. I went through 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of grad school, and next month I'm going to be defending my dissertation. I did not write 240 pages of a dissertation based on belief. It had to be factual information that was reputable and is able to be verified.
And kudos to you for your work in the academy and your studies and your learnedness and erudition. However, all those books behind you, what you wrote, that's based on what we know to be true right now, arguably. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, something may become uncovered that may disprove some of the things that are behind you in those books, and maybe even some of the things that you wrote in your paper. So this is not an attempt to challenge your academic or your intellectual qualifications.
Okay.
So I want to try to be a little bit productive here because I know you're strong in your point of view. Number one, there absolutely is scientific argument for the belief for a God. We cannot get angry at human beings with 5 senses and 3-dimensional sight for making up stories and adding a cast of characters to try to perceive omniscience. You know how?
Wait, real quick. No one has an issue. We're not. Once again, this is not an argument against people practicing religion, right? This isn't an argument against that, right? That's not what this show is about. This is an African-centered critique of the Nation of Islam, and as a byproduct, the religion of Islam,
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to bring it home. I was trying to set it up. So there absolutely are positives in the Nation of Islam, and I wrote in the chat.
We covered that. We covered that.
And I just want to bring it up real quick because Diallo was saying that there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
A sister, there are forces that shape what we know as material existence: gravity, electricity, magnetism, all of those things. People with religious belief just give those things human characteristics. Because, like I said, we can't get angry at humans with our limited senses. This body, this human suit, trying to perceive omniscience. You know how your head starts to hurt when you start thinking about the meaning of things? And this happens in the Nation of Islam with Cornetta Muhammad and her number 19 and 19 Keys. He does a lot of this lowiated pontification. Some of them are very profound, but your head can start to hurt. So what that is when we're trying to perceive omniscience, that's pushing back against the limitations that we have for being in this human suit. So that's what I'm saying. We can't get angry at humans for making them names, adding a cast of characters, or maybe even can't even look down on them to try to perceive omniscience. That's one. Two, positives in the Nation of Islam and positives in religion. Specifically, the Nation of Islam has a very robust prison ministry that produced Malcolm X. That prison ministry is still active today. In fact, one of its products is active on YouTube. George Macon, Street TV Media.
I'm familiar with the prison ministry, and as I stated before, some of the issues I have with the prison ministry is once again typically preying on brothers who lack formal education and the ability to think critically, hyping them up with pseudo information, right, and then having them be ensnared by an organization that then then financially exploits the rank and file. I have an issue with that,
and that's a valid point.
So I think one of the issues I would have is what the end goal of said, once again, ministry.
Can I also ask, because I worked at Rikers Island for a number of years, there was also the Mormons, the Catholics, the Baptists, and the more formal, every church. Mothers, one of the biggest Moms Against Drunk Driving. There are several agencies within the prison receiving, state funds for providing services and ministry to the incarcerated brothers. Why is the Islam given extra accolades or credit than any other religious sect or cult that is operating within the prisons?
Ministries produce the equivalent of a Malcolm X.
If you read Malcolm X's biography, I would go on record to say that the Nation of Islam derailed Malcolm's intellectual development, did not start it or enhance it. If you read his biography, he started learning from a brother who was not a minister before his siblings recruited him into the cult.
This is very
true. That's
and
fact.
then it's a greater disrespect to when this cult took his life in front of his family. I mean, and for us to still in 2024 to be articulating that myth, when Malcolm said on videotape, on record, that they were harassing him, hounding him, that he felt that his life was in danger, and we're still giving them credit. Now, I got many teachers that taught me, but if they're responsible and on record mocking and taking credit for my demise, I'd like to delete any type of anybody that's repeating what they so-called did for me. They don't get no more credit for it. That to me, that is insane.
Because I want to make my point. I'm trying to be productive here because, like I said, I know you guys are in front, and not nothing changing, but and I'm mostly commenting for the people who are listening because YouTube may sound very articulate and well-reasoning, but actually there's some flaws in your reasoning and your logic. And I always wonder how it is that you reconcile being Afrocentric and being atheist, because a belief in the anthropomorphization of those forces that I talked about provided a very powerful light science, which is what I would argue religion is and does. It gives you some very powerful tools and guidances for living
Yeah, so let me answer that question, and I'm glad you brought that up because I am aware of the fact that atheism or being agnostic is not an aspect of traditional African culture.
No way.
I'm aware that
No,
100%,
no way.
and I acknowledge that. I would argue but I don't. For me, there's numerous reasons why I'm atheist, but that's not something that I've needed for me to move forward in my life. Right. I personally don't need myths. I don't need mythology. I don't need a belief in a higher being and so on and so forth for me to have a purpose and movement in my life.
Did you need knowledge and information on, say, how the body works so that you could build up your body? Didn't you have to learn like how to eat, how to do you push out?
Yeah. I took classes. I took classes on weight training. I mean, I appreciate, I feel like you're objectifying me a little bit, but that's quite all right. I appreciate the compliment, right? I'm joking. But I took before I started lifting weights heavy and really getting into fitness, I took classes. I took classes on it.
Oh, can I touch on something real quick, if you don't mind?
Well, very, very quick. I'm sorry. Okay. Sister Hanifa asked the question, what is the scientific evidence that you have regarding that God is real or God exists?
And I thought I explained that, but briefly, so we know white European science that a lot of times people who say that they're atheist and agnostic, they go on that white European science all the time. So we know that there are things like gravity. We know that there are things like magnetism, things like electricity, so on and so forth. There are a plethora of forces that shape and impact what we know as material existence today. What I would argue, so that religion just gives it humanizes those things. It makes up stories. It adds a cast of characters to try to perceive omniscience. This source creation, it may not have even had a beginning or an end. It might just be that it is. So we make up stories to try to perceive it. That's what
right. So you're talking about mythology. Well, I would make the argument. Well, one, my atheism doesn't have anything to do with white science. But the other argument I would make is
I would challenge that because I don't know how you can honor.
So I would tell you. Well, I would tell you. So once again, I can tell you just personally. Very quickly, you can't overtalk me. This is my platform. You can't overtalk me. I came to atheism organically. Right, I understand that all human cultures have their own concept of God, their own views of religion and mythology, their own creation stories. Knowing that, I said, well, if every culture has their own stories about how the world was created and the purpose in life and what God is like, his or her characteristics, I said, then it's obvious that this is man-made. And I was like, I'm good. I was a teenager, like, I'm good. The second issue is electricity, gravity. Most people would argue that does not provide an example or evidence of there being a God. I'm gonna leave that there. But once again, this show was about having an African-centered critique of the Nation of Islam and, of course, Islam, the Islamic religion itself.
Yeah, and let me just say this briefly, and then I'll get off because, like I said, I know I wasn't going to change any hearts or minds or any just for the sake of productivity. I want to get us to a place where we can be productive surrounding these discussions and then go on and actually do something for our liberation surrounding some area of agreement. And I think this is where Diallo goes wrong very often. And Diallo, I saw on Dr. Balltown of Black Power Media, they were doing a show on organizing, him, Renee, Camus, and then there was another guy who has an organization, I forget. And even your own colleagues were saying that maybe you go about things in the wrong way. So your own colleagues have a critique. And one thing I would just say, I would just offer it, just consider this for both of you all. If you're getting a critique and a pushback, is there anything that you're willing to consider, just even consider, maybe I ought to go about something differently, maybe I ought to change something, so on and so forth. If you're getting a constant critique and pushback on a certain thing, like I know Diallo has gotten, that maybe he talks about the Nation of Islam in such a way Mr. William Wakil said this, that it's just counterproductive. It's actually counter-revolutionary. So your behavior and your language is actually counter to the results that you're saying that you seek to get. Let me just say this about the nation.
Real quick, because I don't want you to monologue, but I'm gonna tap in. So the work that I do is focused around treating the people's needs as holy. So the work that I do is number one, to address the material needs of African people at home and abroad. The second issue, I haven't gotten many critiques in terms of the work that I do in the community, because I'm focused. I'm about doing the work. I don't do much rhetoric, so on and so forth.
You're not naming, finger pointing about people like Diallo does.
Right. I'm allowed Diallo to provide a retort. In terms of counter-revolutionary, part of the issue, and I don't want to speak for you, Brother Kenyatta, but when someone asks me a question, I'm going to be honest. Right. One of the things my parents taught me was that as a adult, you should be principle over personal. Right. So I'm not going to engage in subterfuge or conflate information to aside somebody's feelings. Right. The facts are the facts. Right. And so one of the issues that happens is many people, when the issue of the nation comes up, people begin to well, let me not say this. Let me kind of change what really happened. And typically part of it isn't out of respect for the nation, because you could actually make an argument the organization is counter-revolutionary because the members of the organization is actually being financially exploited by the top. One of the issues is because what we find is most people engage in that type of pseudo storytelling about the nation, or they provide a mythological view of the nation or a romanticized view of the nation, is because there's fear of violent reprisal by the nation, because the nation has a history of being violent towards Black people, as do most cults. Most cults have a history of being violent towards the very people they say they're trying to help or save or liberate. So that in itself will be counter-revolutionary. So that these are some things to consider. But the issue is, when someone asks me a question about history, I'm going to give them an honest answer if I actually know the facts.
You were in the U.S. military, correct?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. So when you were in there, and I don't know if they were asking you about the purpose of or the justification of U.S. military action, were you honest then?
Well, so I'm glad you asked that question. So I had several issues when I was in the military, and I actually because during my time in the military, that's when I became politically enlightened. Right, I became politically mature. And so I actually went from private to sergeant in 21 months. After my political maturity, I actually was bumped down from staff sergeant to sergeant, and from sergeant to specialist, and specialist to private first class, private second class, and then, of course, private. Right. And so it was due to my honesty that I actually left the military after my enlistment was up, even though I was offered $25,000 cash to re-enlist. And my son was 2 years old at the time, and I told him I viewed myself as a Uncle Tom putting that uniform on.
Oh, okay, and thank you for that. But my point was, I think you probably kind of bit your tongue a little bit when you were in the U.S. military. So this whole, I'm gonna be honest.
Actually, no, I didn't. And I would give you an example. September of 2006, I made sergeant, and I went to Warrior Leadership Course, which is a leadership course that you go to when you make sergeant in the United States Army at Fort Dix, New Jersey. The first assignment I received in that course was, tell us what you think of the American flag. And I wrote down that the American flag to me is a symbol of imperialism, genocide, and the enslavement of African people. That's what I wrote down. And they were like, what the French toast? Okay. So when I say no, I'm being completely honest. I'm not making this up.
Did you get a discharge?
I'm sorry?
Did you get an honorable discharge?
I received a general discharge under honorable conditions.
Okay. So what you're saying and what you were doing wasn't so egregious that they gave you a dishonorable discharge.
Well, I didn't break any rules, but they did take umbrage with my political ideology. In fact, they were during my time in the Guard, they were calling me Malcolm X, because during my time in the military, I actually changed my name.
Okay, is it to the name you have now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What's your government name? I'm just curious.
My government name is Bakari Lumumba.
Okay.
Bakari K. Lumumba. So once again, and there are people who can verify this.
Mm-hmm.
I actually started growing dreadlocks while I was in the military.
Oh, okay. Again, whatever you were doing or not doing, if it was really, I just wonder if you would have just been like up out of there, or maybe like Jim Tillman, who the football player who went to Afghanistan.
Right, Pat Tillman, yes.
Yeah, Pat Tillman, and then he said, "I'm just going to tell people we're over here guarding the poppy field," and then oops, he got killed by friendly fire. All of a sudden.
I'm quite sure that probably would have happened to me if I had been deployed.
Or okay, but we could debate that and go back and forth. So let me just try to wrap this up and bring this home, because I want to try to be productive. And I wrote in the comments that no Black organization, no ideology, Brother Diallo, no historical figure passes the white glove test. So what can we get people to? How can we have people? How can we have people discerning, eating the meat and spitting out the bone, or something, just so that we can begin to be more
right? Well, I think first and foremost, you have to have an honest critique about the organization. That's number one.
But everybody, Malcolm, King, Black church, socialist, Marxist type, sleeping, with white women, and I could go on and on. No ideology, no organization, no person.
Can I tell you something?
Yes. So,
religion doesn't get that, because socialist, anarchist, communist, nationalist, none of those ideologies or agendas claim to have the almighty, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omnipotent force, answer of all things, creator of all things, and the judgment of all things. So religion cannot put itself, because if religion was subjected to the same scrutiny as all these other things you listed in concert with it, it would have been dismantled centuries ago. But because religion has exempted itself from scrutiny, critique, you sit here and criticize us and call us out. You couldn't walk into any formal religious setting as a woman, Islamic or Christian or Hebrew setting, as a woman, and assert these criticism and ask these questions. You will be told to sit in the congregation and to take in and be dutiful. And if you didn't do that, you would have been denounced and seen as a Jezebel and all this other stuff. So you're enjoying the benefits of secularism while you're promoting theology, and that is contradictory and hypocritical.
So real quick, you stated that you have done those things.
I've done it at the Nation of Islam. I used to go to study.
And what was the response when you made these critiques?
They may have come back with something kind of along the same lines as you guys. It may have sounded good, may have been very logical and sounded well reasoned, but it still went back in support, or it was.
I'm gonna need a tape recording of you inside the Muhammad's mosque, confronting the imam and confronting the speaker as a woman on the floor in any mosque, masjid, or any Islamic space where you as a woman walked in there while the men were politicking and engaging, and you were able to ask questions, offer critiques, and even level criticisms against the people. I'm gonna need that on tape, because I can't take your word for it, because you're telling me oxygen is evidence of God.
Excuse me, can I elaborate, please?
Go ahead. Very quickly. Hold on. Wait. Brother Daniel, I'm allowing you to speak, and then we're gonna pass it to Sister Michelle.
And then
okay. I had experience in being under what they call Orthodox Islam, and I had experience under the NOI. Well, the NOI, they do allow you to ask questions. Matter of fact, after the lecture, they have a question and answer period. But now I want to touch on something else.
But you can't critique. You can ask questions.
Where do they allow the women to come into the common space with they're not even allowed to worship and pray with the men? And you talking about the MGT?
No, listen, they allow the sisters to ask questions. I'm telling you, I'm not somebody that was on the outside. I was in the inside. When they have question answer, they allow men and women to answer ask questions. But in Sunni Islam, they're not allowed to ask nothing.
Send me a recording.
They put them in the curtain. They be
Send me a recording
somewhere. You don't even see them. You don't even see the women.
Brother Daniel, hold on. But there's a difference between asking a question and providing a critique. Now, if you provide a critique, or if you say that they're not doing something right, you're going to be carried out of there.
Oh no, it was women in there that was not MGT. They came out. No, listen. Wait, hold on, wait. No, I'm gonna make this very clear. There's a difference between asking a question and providing a critique. Okay, what
I'm saying is, and based on what I've seen, these 4 eyes.
Okay, I experienced that too. Listen, brother.
Exactly. They're gonna get you up out of there.
Okay, no, it depends. I'm gonna tell you, when I was with Minister Jeremiah, it was a sister. She came in, she critiqued it. She said, "Man, I don't believe in the nation teaches that when you die, that's it. There's no life after death." Exactly. And the sister critiqued it on the question and answer, said, "Look, I know that ain't true because I saw my uncle's spirit. Okay, I experienced that. They didn't carry out the mosque. Minister Jeremiah answers this question to the best way he could do it. But I want to elaborate. The thing about being in a cult, you're not allowed to be your own thinker. You're not allowed to be a free thinker. Okay, and a lot of cults, they suck people in because they do some good works. Like, I'm gonna give you a case in point. Jim Jones, when he first started out, he started off doing some good works, and look what happened with that. They ended up in Guyana. Okay. He fed the homeless. He's got people off of drugs. That's how they suck you in. That's how you get sucked in the cult. They do some good works. And you had Dr. York with the Ansar Allah community.
Right.
And you had Yawin Binyawi with the Hebrew Israelite community in Miami, who was a member of the NOI at one time, and he started a cult. And they was killing people, chopping people's heads off. They didn't agree with him.
Right.
So a lot of cults got dark sides too. They have a dark side.
And a bright side. You meant dark side and a bright side.
Yeah, but a lot of they use the good side to suck you in.
You can't give me no bright side and they out here committing murder. Like, come on, sister. If they're if they're deleting people, if this is an organization that's going around deleting people who are non-believers, how does that organization have a bright side? Like, come on now. Come on.
Who? What organization did you say was actually killing people, Daniel?
All of them were doing it. The NOI did it. They had a situation in Philadelphia where this brother was a different Sunni sect, Hamas from DC. When he wrote a letter to all the mosques talking about critiquing Elijah Muhammad, brothers from Philadelphia went there and killed his whole family. Yahweh Ben Yahweh, he had people killed. Okay, Dr. York threatened Dr. Ben's life. And he was involved in some stuff too. That's what cults do.
The only difference between religion and a cult is the body count.
Yeah, a lot of them have body counts, sister.
That's the only difference. Religions kill continents and cults kill communities.
That's a snazzy one-liner that you guys like to try to engage in. More interested in the snazzy one-liners with the sound bites and all this sort of thing. They're actually trying to get you some actionable ideas, the things that we can actually do to bring about this liberation that we all say that we want. So I just said all that to say, I was trying to find out a couple of things. How can we get people to have constructive value in leadership? I'm trying to find my words here. Because if you don't believe in anything, then you have nothing that anybody says or does is of any value, except you and the people you like and agree with.
Well, no, I won't say that. Like my goal in life is to work towards the liberation of African people. Right. Okay. Number one, in doing that is to treat the people's material needs as holy. So a lot of the work that I do was focused around
holy or whole. Like
I'm
holy,
sorry.
Holy, like
holy. Treat the people's needs as holy, particularly their material needs. So
if you say holy, like H-O-L-Y?
Yes, H-O-L-Y, holy.
Okay.
Right? So the meaning, I treat the people's needs as their material needs as preeminent, right? So in terms of doing work to help people, in terms of having access to food, right? So I volunteer at a food pantry, right? In terms of volunteer at the local job center where we help people with job training so they can get skills so they can take care of themselves, right? So I choose to focus on people's needs, right? Now, as an academic, I oftentimes am questioned on history, things they say, hey, this didn't sound right, this person came to me, XYZ. And so along that line, I always tell people in the organization that you're part of, there's a couple of things that you should look for. One, does this organization advocate people being lovers, being intellectually curious, right? I say that's number one. Does this organization practice financial accountability, right? Because many organizations are financial black holes. All the money go in and no one knows what happens to it, right? These are some things. Are the goals and missions and the goals and missions of this organization, are they tangible? Are they realistic? Right? Now that, okay, we don't understand white supremacy is a problem, anti-blackness is an issue, and the solution is to travel from the north to the south via guerrilla warfare, but that's not realistic. Right? You know what I mean? So these are things I tell people if you're going to join an organization, these are things that you want to look at. In the organization, is the decision-making process centered around one charismatic individual, or is it decentered to where members of the organization are able to provide input and then you come to a consensus?
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because that leads me to my last point, in that Black people are out here taken advantage of left and right, and not say anything. So let me offer up, just as Laguma offered up some things for evaluation. So when you're evaluating who to listen to, because a lot of people out here, and they're so good-hearted, and they really do want something better, and they just don't know certain things. And so these people are coming along, the Jay Morrisons, even a Brother Diallo, and they sound good, and boy, they got the gift of gab, and it makes it sound logical and well-reasoned. Look at it like this. Is YouTube or social media their accomplishment, or do they have accomplishments to put on YouTube or social media? Another thing is, look at what kind of things have they been able to get done in the world. Look at outcomes,
yes,
progress, things that they've been able to get done. If they sound good, they put together a good presentation of video, they don't have outcomes and productivity, results from their teaching that they're doing on YouTube, that's just something else to consider. Look at their life and themselves. Do they have mastery over themselves? Are they somewhat of an evolved person? Are they making progress in life? Do they start here and then this and that? These are just some things to think about, because there's so many people out here talking.
If you held that standard, you wouldn't be sitting here defending Islam and Christianity and absurdist theological beliefs. If you really held to that standard, Michelle.
I'm sorry, what did you say, John?
If you held to that standard about what are the outcomes, you're sitting here defending belief systems, theologies that have committed global genocide, that are currently engaged in genocidal, colonial, and imperialist practices. So if you were really determining and judging things according to their outcomes, the belief in a supernatural God.
Stop. Diallo, you finished. Then Michelle, you provide a retort. But if you're talking at the same time, the viewers can't understand what either one of you are saying.
You came on here trying to justify the existence of a God that not only has committed global genocide on more than one occasion, if you believe that God is real, that has also been the impetus to some of the greatest ongoing atrocities and current atrocities in the world. If you really are talking about, before you get into something, you have to look at what its outcome and what it's produced. You wouldn't be on here defending supernatural beliefs. And as far as beliefs unto itself, I do have beliefs. I believe Xbox is better than the PlayStation. I believe Justin peanut butter cups, organic peanut butter cups, are better than Reese's. But I don't think that people that disagree with that belief are destined for hell or unclean or sinful. See, I can have beliefs that I cherish, but I cannot base my ideology or my methods or my cause based on those beliefs. So beliefs are good and healthy for someone to hold if they hold it in the proper. If your whole identity and your whole outlook on the world and your mission in life is based on a belief, then you are going to be either a oppressor or oppressed. So yes, beliefs, everyone has beliefs, but beliefs are not, if I come to you and say, hey, do this or do that based on a belief, you should reject me out of hand. So I act and advocate based on evidence, as Lumumba said. And I enjoy and navigate the world, things that I'm entertained or stimulated by based on beliefs.
Okay. Now, I just said there is scientific evidence from that white European science that you guys hold in such high esteem.
You talking about quantum physics?
They're looking for the God particle.
The fact that you're saying white European science is evidence you don't comprehend science.
Stop. I talked about ad hominems. We don't do that. I don't engage in European science. You keep bringing that up. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never even studied. I don't study natural science. I took 2 biology courses when I was in community college. And my position in life is not based off of European science. But we're not going to do ad hominems. You're going to attack the argument, not the person. I brought that up when we opened up the chat. I don't do that on my platform. Because one of the things you're doing, this is conjecture. I don't make decisions based on European science. I don't. That's not what I'm into. That's not what I'm about.
Who in African history, culture, was an atheist?
Once again, I told you before, my atheism for me was organic. It has nothing to do with white people at all.
But if you're saying that you're teaching a world view based on being African-centered, but yet you're an atheist, and that permeates your
No, what I stated was that we were providing an African-centered critique of the Nation of Islam and is the Islamic religion. I never said anything about now. What I talked about was that in the classroom, I teach African and African American history from an African-centered pedagogical perspective. That's what I said. And I don't go around telling anyone to be an atheist. I don't. That's something that's personal. Mm-hmm. I don't do that. I don't tell people what religion to practice, what not to practice. However, when people bring conversations to me about particular religions, this is what I tell folks. One, you need to understand, you need to know your history as an African person. You need to know the history of the religion, and you need to know the history of how African people came in contact with this religion. Because what you typically get in the mosque, in the masjid, and in the church, and even with these Hebrew Israelite temples or synagogues, is you get a narrative, not actual history. For example, in my class, we were covering the Middle Ages. And we were actually reading Dr. John Henry Clark's book, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust. And we were talking about purgatory. So the students asked, well, how did purgatory come into being? Dr. John Henry Clark brilliantly elucidates on how purgatory came into being. Europeans were fighting, the Catholic Church was fighting the Holy War, right? The Crusades. They needed money to fund their fight against the infidels, the Muslims, and the Holy Land. So guess what they did? They came up with this concept of purgatory to get families to pay for people to pray, for the priests to pay for their loved one to make it to heaven. So it doesn't. So what I'm saying is, I don't give a damn if the person's a Catholic or not, but you need to know this actual history rather than just a story that you're being told in a religious institution. Because what that means is you're simply being manipulated and not educated.
Well,
let me say something. Can I ask you a question, sister? I'm gonna tell you something, and this is a true story. When the Nation of Islam under Elijah Muhammad was around, they used to teach that Mr. Elijah Muhammad was going to live like Methuselah. Okay, as soon as he died in 1975, there was some people that had to get fitted for a straitjacket because it didn't come out the way they said it was going to be. And now in the current Nation of Islam, they teach that Elijah Muhammad is physically alive. And that Mr. Farrakhan is going to go away and be on the mother plane with Elijah Muhammad. What if that don't happen and he died of natural causes? So you see the issue with that? You see the issue with that?
Absolutely. Mysticism. That exists in traditional African religion too.
Well, no, it's not the same. It's not the same.
There's a book here, Tribalism, Mysticism, Primitivism, and the Rise of Genocide Against the African World, written by a brother here in Chicago, Batu Shikari. He has the African World Research Institute right on 75th, right up the street from Soul Veg. And he argues in this book that by the way, his orientation is, that's another thing to the people listening. Just look at the orientation that people, the point of view that they take towards life, politics, religion, and all sorts of other things. With Batu, I'm sorry, Lumumba and Diallo, they're atheists. They have a very strong, what I think is a bias against religion, in that we're not going to hear about positives from religion and religious stuff, because religion and religious stuff can offer quite a few positives in life science, the guidance in how to live.
Wait. So first off, no, because you said something about me that's patently false. I have on numerous occasions on my platform and in the classroom talked about the benefits of religion. I give you an example. In class, there was a situation in which students weren't doing their readings, right? And I said, well, it's on the syllabus. I said, so we were talking about religion. I said, well, what are some of the benefits of religion? I said, typically what? You are able to fellowship with people of similar beliefs. The belief part of that is what children are able to be socialized in a safe environment. I said, but it also gives you a code of conduct to live your life by.
Okay.
And I said, the syllabus is the code of conduct. And each week it tells you what you're supposed to do, i.e. what you're supposed to read. So once again, you are making claims about me, sister, that are patently false. False. But in the history, you don't know me. You've never been on my platform. And you're making these claims.
It's my first time camming up.
Yeah.
Listen to you.
Okay.
If you would have caught the beginning of the discussion, we were talking about the positive aspect of the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, and I was trying to get the positives, and then
we did that. We did that. The brother was talking about the positive stuff too.
I was there for some of that, and then these two derailed me and say, but it can't be positive if it has this history of colonialism.
Lumumba didn't say that. That was
real quick. Is Diallo gone? But the structure of commerce and all the successes in commerce that the early nation had were a positive and a benefit. I know that the Marxists and the socialists often think that when Black people have practiced capitalism, they don't see any benefit in that.
Well, we're not here to talk about that. But one of the issues, particularly when we talk about the businesses in the nation during the early period, was the fact that, once again, and Carl Evans talks about it in his book, The Rise and Fall of Elijah Muhammad, numerous members of the nation talk about this, was the fact that it was a pyramid scheme, was the fact that the higher ups were living off the rank and file. So they were still being exploited, that there was extortion taking place.
Okay.
So yes, there were businesses, but the members of the organization weren't benefiting from the capital that these businesses were creating, or only the higher ups.
I gotta tell you something else, sister.
This is according to Munir Muhammad, who founded the Coalition for the Remembrance of Elijah.
I know Munir from Chicago. Yeah, I know him.
Yeah. And so some people did benefit, and they were able to get employment that would allow them to have some social mobility. However, yes, there was exploitation. And this is what I want to say to Diallo and the socialists and the Marxists who don't see anything.
Because I'm not a socialist or a Marxist.
Okay. So this is for Diallo and them. And anytime you point Black people having success in capitalism, they see that as a negative because of the exploitation, which was there. However, let me say this. One of the reasons that the elites give for why they have to exploit us is because we don't know how to do it for ourselves. So when you see Black people, especially, running, organizing, managing, administrating goods and services and a means of productions and having a town and so on and so forth, there is an accomplishment to be taken in that. Now we want to perfect it so that it is more egalitarian. But to say that there's no accomplishment in Black Wall Street or what the Nation of Islam had in the early days, that is patently false. So I just wanted to point out that one of the positives of the nation was this economic structure, not perfect, but still somewhat accomplished and an accomplishment that Black people can look to and take a certain degree of pride in. And there are transferable skills that we can learn from doing Black Wall Street and what the Nation of Islam did to apply to any social system. Now that's our work, is to perfect it so that it is more egalitarian and that the rank and file is not exploited. And that would be a criticism that I have of the nation. It's too top-heavy. Everything goes towards Nation of Minister Farrakhan and that elite group of ministers, and like I said, not enough to the rank and file. A positive of the Nation of Islam. Even today, another thing for people to look at in terms of evaluating people and all these voices that you have coming at you today is look at the fruit that it bears, especially over time. So if you look at some people who are thought leaders in the Black community today, Ben X, 19P, Islam, they come out of the Nation of Islam.
Well, so let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there.
And again, they're not perfect either.
No, but here's the issue. Much of what they propagate is pseudo information. So these individuals aren't thought leaders at all. They're still promoting misinformation, ahistorical claims. That's not a thought leader.
Can I ask you a question, sister?
Wait, hold on, real quick. Hold on. I'm serious about this because this cheapens my profession, right? These individuals aren't scholars. They haven't gone to college. They don't know how to do research or conduct their own research. Right? I'm about to finish my PhD next month. I had to do my own rigorous, in-depth, qualitative study. Right? That's what a doctorate, a PhD is. You have to do your own actual research. You have to create. These individuals aren't thought leaders.
Well, Islam has actually debated and kind of mopped the floor with medical doctors, PhD.
Once again,
has engaged in some study and research.
Once again, hold on, ma'am. You can't overtalk me on my platform. You cannot overtalk me on my platform because I wouldn't do the same to you. When I go on other people's top platform, I don't overtalk them. Mr. Islam does not have a background in the medical industry. He is not a healthcare professional. And so here's part of the issue. And one of my good friends who I actually grew up with is a medical doctor. One of the issues I have with people who debate medical science and they aren't actual doctors, have gone to medical school or work in the healthcare industry, is what they say can't be held to task. If a medical doctor goes on a platform, goes out on a public lecture and makes claims that are adverse to the facts, they could lose their license.
Dr. Fauci just did it for about a couple of years. So,
right.
And a lot of
you're talking about regarding COVID.
A lot of doctors just did during the whole COVID issue.
Once again, I would disagree because my best friend, one of my best friends, is an actual medical doctor. And I would ask him about, these are claims that people are making. He broke it down with me. We had several conversations. The claims they're making are patently false. Because once again, that's not how the healthcare industry works. For example, many people would bring up, what's the guy that, the dude in New York, he was calling himself Dr. Sebi.
Dr. Sebi, yeah.
Dr. Sebi was not a doctor. He had never gone to medical school. He had no medical training. He had never even been to college. But he was calling himself a doctor. Why? Because he knew as a Black person, he could make this claim. And because he looks like us, most Black people aren't going to say, well, let me fact check you. Where did you get your degree? And so people were coming to his office, pseudo clinic, and what? Saying, I don't feel well, I have an ailment, but he wasn't actually practicing medicine. Because to practice medicine, you have to diagnose the problem and then prescribe treatment. He never did any of that. He would just look people over and then say, hey, you need to change your diet and exercise. Right. So wait. So this is an example of someone finagling the community and they're able to get over because they're Black.
Yeah, like I remember one of his pseudo claims.
Very quick. Another issue is the fact that we know our history in connection with the what? Healthcare system. We know that we have been historically and contemporarily victims of healthcare, and I would call it no care. Right? We talk about the father of gynecology. We talk about forced sterilizations of Black women. We talk about the syphilis experiment, so on and so forth. Right? And we know even with the syphilis experiment, Tuskegee University was aware of it and agreed to provide Black people to the United States government to engage in that detrimental and demonic medical experiment on African people in America, right? Once again, we talk about oppression, perpetrators, collaborators, and victims. So because we are leery of this, right? I have a book by Dr. Vanelia Randall. She's the professor emeritus of civil rights at the University of Dayton in my hometown. She wrote a book titled Dying While Black. I actually got to meet her. She was a mentor to my ex-wife, right? However, these individuals aren't medical scientists. They don't have a background in healthcare. So I don't want to hear anything you have to say, because if a doctor gives me some misinformation, he's going to be sued for medical malpractice. He will possibly go to prison, etc., etc.
Not really.
Once again, yes, really. Because yes, really, because the laws are in place to protect the consumer. That's why there's a thing called patient bill of rights.
But the vaccine skirted around a lot of that, and that's why you can't. If people died or have problems because of the vaccine, they can't. They don't have any recourse to bring anybody.
But here's the thing. So you're conflating. You don't go through your PCP, primary care physician, to get the vaccine. That's something you was able to do independently on your own, outside of your primary care physician.
But they recommended it though. I have emails where mine did.
Well, I didn't have it. When I talked to my homeboy, he's my primary care physician. He lives in another state. He told me this is the vaccine that you should get. He said, don't get these other two, get this one. Right? And so I listened to him because he went to medical school. He did his residency at Duke. He lives in North Carolina now, but at the time he was the head of internal medicine at Northwestern University Hospital on the near north side. The head of internal medicine. So I said, I'm going to listen to you. This is what he does for a living every single day, right? I'm going to listen to that person rather than someone who doesn't have a background or even an education in the healthcare industry.
Well,
to me, that's just common sense.
I would argue that, let me just say, as somebody who has had quite a bit of encounters, I'm recovering from a foot surgery now.
And you're doing well, and I know you're doing well.
Well, that's why I'm even here. So,
and I had shoulder surgery back in February on my left shoulder.
Okay. So you've been dealing with the medical system. So I'm a cancer survivor. I've had a lot more experience with the medical system than I would like to admit to. And let me say this: Big Pharma has the medical system on lock.
Yes, they do. I would agree with that.
Your brother, who has all those credentials, and I'm sure he's a sharp brother, he's beholden to what Big Pharma says is right, is wrong. This is how.
I would say no, because based on the conversations I've had with him, that's not the case. Even my primary care physician, she always says my goal is not to have my patients have to go the Big Pharma route. Right? She said, we're going to do these things in a manner in which we don't have to. Right? So the issue I had with my shoulder, I did something stupid. I saw I work out a lot. And I was doing heavy shoulders to the point I was military pressing 225 for reps. Right? My dumb behind, finished my workout. Young brothers come and say, hey, man, we want to play basketball. Can you run with us? You can't mix heavy lifting with quick twitch. I tore my rotator cuff on my labrum. Right? Go to the doctor. I said, I went home, took a shower, ate dinner, went to bed. My shoulder's killing me. She said, let's do some band work. Did some band work, didn't get any better. She said, okay, it's okay. So just do PT, go to physical therapy. That didn't work. Still was a problem to the point I was bench pressing 225, which is light for me. I could do it like 25, 30 times. And it felt like there was a knife cutting through my shoulder. So this is the problem. I said, okay. She said, okay. Physical therapy didn't work. She said, let's do a X-ray. X-ray, couldn't see that. I did an MRI. Then we saw, okay, there's an issue here. You have a torn rotator cuff and a torn labrum. She said, you're going to have surgery. I said, listen, I'm an African-American. I said, as you know, right, this is an issue. We go under the knife for something routine and simple, and we never wake up. I said, this happened to one of my best friend's grandmothers when I was a junior in high school. She said, I understand. I met with the surgeon, white guy. I said, listen, we need to talk. This is my position, yada, yada, yada. I said, what is the mortality rate? Oh, he said, sir, this is a quick 20-minute. I said, I've heard that before, and I never saw a person again, right? I made sure my family was there. Like, listen, I need y'all to be here because this, right? Hold up. This is the person's number, name, boom, boom, boom. Everything went fine, right? So all I'm saying is, We know that there are issues with the healthcare system, but you also need to get with a primary care physician, someone you trust. And I thoroughly vetted. I actually picked out 5 PCPs and then interviewed all of them. Looked up their background credentials, had my best friend look them up, the whole 9, before I picked who was going to be my PCP. So we also have to do our due diligence as well.
Yeah, I have a sister as my PCP now. However good they may be, there are some things about the medical system that are corrupt. So even being in that corrupted of a system can sometimes corrupt them. What I found is that Western medicine is good with advanced disease. For example, I had a lesion on my right foot. The doctor says it just comes from stress, repeated stress. I'm way fat. I'm like 216 pounds. Weight gain, plantar fasciitis. So my feet have been stressed and they basically ripped. So I had a lesion. They had to take it out. Says don't leave it there. It could get infected, gangrene, all that stuff. Anyway,
right.
So I was in advanced disease in all my cancer and all my stuff. So there's illness, advanced disease, and then there's wellness.
Right, I would agree.
Has nothing for me, literally nothing for me in terms of wellness.
I would agree with that.
I'm not sick, and that's because of all the things that I've done from my studies, even in places like the Nation of Islam, learning how to eat, learning some things about life science, learning some things about how to align with the ways of the world. There's just when you do things that are in order with the flow of creation, you get better outcomes. That's just religion, if you want to call it that. So these are the things that I learned about in my studies. I've been to Sarasate Society. I've been to the Nation of Islam. I've been to Malcolm X grassroots movement. I've learned quite a bit from Akul and Jerry and Fred Hampton Jr. So I've taken in a whole plethora of ideas, and I've landed in the space that I am now, where I'm able to kind of pick what works for me. And I know Diallo has a snazzy one-liner. Spirituality is for lazy people. But anyway, so the point that I'm making is now.
And what city are you located in?
Chicago.
South side?
North side, near North in the Old Town, Cabrini area, where.
Okay, I know where you at. I know you at. My homeboy used to live in Streeterville.
Oh, okay. Yep, over there by Northwestern. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, where Jussie Smollett did whatever.
Yeah. What he did.
Yeah,
you mean Juicy?
Yeah, the fake.
Western medicine is very good with advanced disease. When I had my tumor, which by the way came from me using talcum powder, and I'm involved in a lawsuit against Johnson & Johnson.
That's where you should be.
Trying to file bankruptcy and have to pay people pennies on the dollars, but the law firms are fighting against that. So anyway, I got my ovarian cancer. My tumor ended up being like a softball-sized tumor. It was from using talcum powder for hygiene. One of the reasons I stopped using talcum powder for hygiene was I was going to places like this. I was studying and learning more about life and health. So my religion came to me by way of life science. That's why I don't see illogicness or fallacy in religious belief, because it just gives you guides and tools for how to live.
Well, yes, they do. However, real quick, they do, but there's other times when we talk about particular religions, the guides they provide are detrimental to African people. So I'll give you an example, and I'll give you an example. We talked about this in one of my courses with the students in terms of how, as Brother Daniel talked about, the religion being incongruent with the culture, right? So in Judeo-Christian religion, getting tattoos is considered a sin because according to these religions, the body is a temple. However, in traditional African culture, getting a tattoo is a rite of passage.
I've seen Christian ministers with tattoos, so I don't know.
Stop, please. You're conflating. It does. I'm telling you, I'm not talking about an individual person. I'm talking about what the religion states. The religion states that this is a sin. Yes, you're going to have people who are practitioners of religion that act in a manner that is not in accordance with the actual religion. But the religion, ma'am.
Okay.
The religion states that what? This is a sin, and this practice is a cultural practice of African people that's particularly part of a rite of passage. A great book on tattooing in traditional African culture was a book written by Michael Gomez. I'm sorry, let's put some respect on his name, Dr. Michael Gomez of New York University. He wrote the book. It's titled Exchanging Our Country Marks. right? Second issue is that in these different religions, in Abrahamic religions, the only true God is the Abrahamic God, right? Any other religion or belief in God is considered pagan, i.e. devil worship, right? And the cultures that created those religions are considered pagan and devil worship. So in these Abrahamic faiths, in order to get closer to God, you have to go through a process of self-abnegation, in which you seek to distance yourself from your own history, heritage, and culture in order to get closer to the divine. This isn't my own perspective or my scholarship. Dr. Ali Mazuri talked about this in the book he wrote in 1986, Africans, the Triple Heritage. Molefi K. Asante talks about this in his book that was written in 1980, Afrocentricity. So this scholarship has been around for a long time. We're talking about nearly over 40 years, right? And so what we find is that it creates, for most people, not only identity dysphoria, but also self-hatred. Because if you're taught that your origins, your history, your culture, your heritage was voodoo, and we know the concept of voodoo being seen as something that's bad came as a result of us kicking Napoleon's ass down there in Haiti, right? Then what does that create? Self-hatred. And people that hate themselves engage in racially disempowering, self-defeating, self-destructive behavior. So the very institution that's supposed to be saving your soul is actually the instrument of your own damnation. And the work that I do is Pan-Africanist in nature. I just came back from Ghana. I was in Ghana last month, where we see our people, no matter irrespective of where they are, they're hyper-religious, practicing alien religions, but they can't stand. Shout out to the Black Star, but they can't stand what they see in the mirror. So the religion isn't dealing with the actual issue. It's the fact that they hate our people hate being African.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna point out a self-hatred teaching.
Real quick, and it gets so far to the point. There's self-hatred teachings in the Nation of Islam as well.
Yeah, I want to touch on one. When the nation taught that our hair was straight, and they talk about against the kinky of woolly hair. There's a tape out there with Farrakhan making a mockery of kinky woolly hair.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, so you know, so that's why we these shows need to be. We need to have these shows to point out the ills. You know what I'm saying? That's poisonous. That needs to be exposed. That needs to be discussed.
I'm about to pull it up. Everybody always wants receipts. So give me 1 second. Okay, page 97. This is the book Modern Black Nationalism from Marcus Garvey and Louis Farrakhan. We're going to go here, page 97. This is Elijah Muhammad, Nation of Islam. He talks about how, let's see here. Yes, the Know Thyself, 1965, on page 99. The origin of our kinky hair, says Allah, came from one of our dissatisfied scientists 50,000 years ago who wanted to make all of us tough and hard in order to endure the life of the jungles of East Asia, to overcome the beast there, but he failed to get others to agree with him. And when I was part of my organization, I had them read this stuff. They was like, this is the type of crap they really believe?
They actually got people believing it. I used to believe that.
Yeah. So once again,
out of ignorance, I used to believe that stuff.
So once again, and Malcolm talked about that. He says we believe the things that Elijah Muhammad was teaching us, even though he was just making stuff up because we didn't know any better.
He got that from. I'm not gonna put that on Elijah Muhammad because he got that from Farad Muhammad,
right?
The one that came from India,
right?
I told you it was some caste system teachings in the Nation of Islam's doctrine.
Farad Muhammad was a con man. He was a con artist.
Yeah, he was locked up in San Quentin.
And didn't he just disappear? Like nobody knows what happened to him?
Right, nobody knows what happened to him.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are like I was telling Brother King David, I said, if you're that it would be like, I remember when I was in undergrad. So we talking about years ago, there was a sister I was talking to. I thought she was kind of nice looking and whatnot. She had a daughter. And so we had a conversation about religion. I said, well, what do you teach your daughter about religion? She said, well, I teach my daughter that God is a woman. I said, okay, but if you're going to teach her that, you need to back it up with something that could substantiate that. So you need to teach her about African religions in which there's duality in terms of the divine. Don't just tell her something and you can't substantiate it, because when she goes out into the real world and someone begins to ask her questions, all her self-esteem is going to be deflated. I didn't tell her not to believe in God or religion, but I said, if you're going to make a claim, you need to be able to substantiate that. And you can do that providing your children with factual information. That's what I do with my children. I have a children's book up here on world religions. I have my children read this stuff. So matter of fact, so my daughter and I, and when it's warm outside, we would eat dinner, then go for a walk. Because she's a teenager, so that's really the only way you get them to talk to you when they're teenagers, right? And so we're taking a walk. So Mormons pull up. They try to proselytize. Hey, did you know about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Are you familiar with the Book of Mormon? I said, I am familiar with the Book of Mormon. I've actually read the Book of Mormon. They said, really? I said, absolutely. They said, well, why aren't you a Mormon? Because I read the Book of Mormon, right? They said, well, would you mind coming to our church and so on and so forth? I said, well, no, thank you. They said, why? I said, because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints up until 1980 had the official belief that Black people didn't have souls.
Yeah, the Jehovah's Witnesses taught the same thing.
Right. So I said, I can't be part of an organization like that. I said, because that was the official position. I'm quite sure you all still think that way. It's just not on a mantle. It's not on the publicly made available. So we walk away. My daughter was like, man, you cooked them. Right. But I was able to defend myself because I had that factual information, not just some pseudoscience somebody shared with me and told me. You see what I'm saying here? So that's what I'm talking. I promote, of course, people being intellectually curious, right? I don't tell people what to believe, but I do tell people what to think. I teach people how to think.
Right, and I say that too. I say study all of it. Study, just take a look objectively at all of this stuff. We're Moors, we're Indians, we're even if people who say, well, in traditional African culture, it was this way and it was that way. Okay. Is it that way now?
But here's the thing. But here's the other thing. All you have to do when someone makes that claim is ask, well,
he got stuck. Oh, man.
Mute.
You're mute. You're stuck. Oh man, hope he come back on. Does he know he's stuck?
I don't think so. Dyron or
Daniel.
No, I'm talking to somebody in the chat said that I'm omitting a lot about religion because of bias. No, I'm trying to get people.
Okay, we're good to go now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned. So where was I at? I'm sorry.
You were talking
I think you was talking about the Mormons and all that stuff, and you had to.
Yes. So when people talk about in traditional culture, then the question is, okay, well, can you tell me what culture you're referring to? And typically, when you do that, the person can't, because most people, once again, were engaged in subterfuge. They will make a blanket statement. They know most people aren't knowledgeable of African history, so then they could get over on you. Right, I can recall there was a time where I was in Miami, Florida. At 305, I was trying to, be Big Willie style, right? You know what I mean? And we were outside and we were about to go to Miami Beach, and some Hebrew Israelites came and they had like a picture of some hieroglyphics. They said, "You see here, this is when the ancient Egyptians enslaved us." And I said, first off, I could read hieroglyphics. Well, I could at the time, but if you don't use it, you lose it. Because I was taught how to read hieroglyphics from Baba Larry Crow, who was an acolyte, and I can argue that he was a partner of Hakiar Matabuti in the Institute of Positive Education and Third World Press.
Yeah, I studied with Jay Carruthers for a while.
And yes, he was a mentee of Dr. Jacob Carruthers, and of course John G. Jackson and John Henry Clark. So this is my connection to the great master teachers.
And don't forget about Walter Williams. Walter Williams, I got his book, the Historical Origins of Islam.
Right. I said that's not what that says. I said that actually means XYZ. And the guy looked at me like he had seen a ghost. I said, what you're doing is you are purposely and knowingly going out here promoting misinformation and manipulating people because people don't know how to read hieroglyphics.
I'm gonna tell you nothing. Hebrew is like.
I said that is extremely disrespectful and once again counterproductive. And the guy looked at me. They got their stuff and they took off. So a lot of people do this and they look like us. So like I said, one of my biggest critiques of the nation not only is just the financial exploitation of rank and file, but they're not actually educating people. They're teaching people things that are patently ahistorical.
Pseudo.
I mean, like, for example, and this is before I think you came on the show, and I hope you subscribe and you come on a regular basis, because we need more sisters being part of the conversation, is that When I went to the meeting, because I've gone to several Nation of Islam meetings, I said, let me pick this brother's brain for a minute, because he don't know who I am. I said, brother, why do you call yourself the Asiatic black man? He said, well, because when all of the continents were one, the whole world was called Asia. I said, well, brother, that's actually not true. I said, the first time a landmass that we know of in recorded human history was called Asia was when Herodotus in the 400s BC coined the term for the landmass east of the Aegean Sea. I said, where are you getting this stuff from? You know where he got it from? He got it from what? The Supreme Wisdom lessons. Right? So once again, they wrote this stuff, they made stuff up, wrote it down and said this is the truth when it's actually false. That's a problem. And I would argue that any entity, any organization, any program, any initiative that miseducates our people, they do not have their best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could argue that anyone who says, like, for example, you seem to put a lot of credence in. Let me just tell this story real quick. I volunteered with the African Festival of the Art here in Chicago for years, many years. And one time I was volunteering, and the Center for what's that place? The Center
For Inner City Studies.
Exactly. They had a tent right next to brother. I've been off the scene for a while. Brother, he has a black bookstore. Brother Yoel here in Chicago, his black bookstore. So the Center for Inner City Studies with the PhD and the ASCAP members, they had a tent right next to Brother Yoel bookstore tent. And nobody was really in the Center for Inner City Study tent with the ASCAP members and the people who have PhDs in African studies and African history. But a lot of people were in Brother Yoel's tent, and he had Minister Inky and some other people there. So a lot of people were there, but not very many people in the Center for Inner City Studies tent. So I brought this up to Yoel, and Yoel said that they're bougie. They're very, very bougie, and that's why nobody's over there. And I said, people have valuable information to bring to the community. I don't care if they have a PhD or not. Is it valuable? Is it relevant? Is it credible? Let them bring it forth to the community.
I would agree. But here's the issue. This isn't valuable or credible. It's false. It's apocryphal. It's ahistorical.
Can I finish? But it's when I hear you speak, Lumumba, I'm constantly hearing you say only the credentialed scholars have validity, and people like
validity, right. Well, once again, I mean, but that's part of it. But once again, that
validity in what they're saying.
That is part of being a scholar, but also being a critical thinker, where you're able to do what? You're able to discern who is a credible and reputable scholar and who is not. But for example, there's a brother of mine that he's a great Pan-Africanist. When he comes on the show, I say he's your favorite historians. He's taught me a lot about African history. He's written over 27 or 28 books on African history, Afro-Caribbean history, and African-American history. But he self-publishes. Even he admitted, he said, yeah, because I self-publish, my scholarship isn't as rigorous as it would be if I was publishing and I was in an academy. He said, so I don't have to be as on point with my citations or some of the claims and quotes that I make. That's the reality. You see what I'm saying? And so, like I said, when we're talking about wanting to help develop a healthy Black identity, we want to do the things that we want to do. Reputable information is extremely important. Extremely important. As a matter of fact, it's one of the reasons why I take issues with historical movies, because most of the information in the movies is ahistorical.
Yeah, creative license. A lot of creative license.
Right. So once again, but I would agree when you say the bougie aspect, because I've been around them. And I one of my critiques of the academy, and I've even shared this with colleagues, is, most people who are in the academy, they're so ivory tower minded that it becomes so philosophical that what they state isn't tangible. For example, I talk about this in my master's thesis, that one of the critiques I provided of Pan-Africanism is Pan-Africanists tend to intellectualize our problems rather than actually solve them. And when you go to the and when you go over there, what happens? The intellectualizing issues, rather than saying stop all the word salad. How about we just organize ourselves and address the problem? And when I was part of the Coalition of African Unity, that's what we did. We said, now we know there's an intellectual aspect to the work that we're doing. Absolutely. That's why we have study groups and so on and so forth, book clubs, so on and so forth, right? However, I said the biggest issue is we're going to do the work. And we were very successful. We actually had situations where individuals I would like to call victories over white supremacy. For example, we had a brother in the organization who had his own cleaning company. We're in Dayton. He was contracted to do some work in Columbus, which is where I'm at now. Columbus is an hour away. And he did the work for this white firm. They said, we ain't gonna play your black, we're not gonna pay your black ass. He contacted me while I was on the job, working at the university that will forever remain nameless. And he says, hey man, you think you can help me with this? I said, give me the information to the business. I typed up a letter with a letterhead, said my client has made me aware of XYZ, send it off. I get an email, we go back and forth. I provided the information showing that my client did the job. This is what he's supposed to be paid. They were supposed to be paid like $1,900 something. They thought they could just screw them because they were black. So I said, listen, you have till Friday by 4 p.m. to render the check for services, to provide the check for services rendered, or we're going to sue you, contact the Better Business Bureau of Franklin County, and sue you in Franklin County Common Pleas Court. End of conversation. Guess what happened? They cut that check. Right? We didn't have to go off. So there were other situations where we help people be victorious over white supremacy. We're not going to intellectualize these issues. We're going to actually do the work.
Right? Y'all still exist?
No, we actually we didn't. We don't still exist. We actually we're still together in spirit, but I actually moved away. And then when I moved away, things began to dissolve. But one of the things we were able to do, all of the money that we raised in the organization, when the organization dissolved, we took the bank, we closed out the bank account, and everybody got a check for the amount that was in the account.
Okay.
Right. So we can actually say people that were part of the organization benefited from being in the organization.
Does the book club still exist?
The book club does not still exist.
Oh, man, I wish it did, because I would like to join it.
To pursue my doctorate, and if anybody knows when you get a PhD, it's very busy.
Yes, it is. It is.
And I was like, there's no way I could do this. Because at first, I'm like, I could drive back every weekend. It got to the point like I couldn't, because there was an expectation to write papers, and I had to write it on a level that like my professors, and it was just a lot. And I had to go present at conferences, so it just ended up being a lot. But my hope is that when I finish next month, when I defend my dissertation, I can then get back to being more centered in the community as I was before I started my doctoral journey. But those are some of the issues. But it is very important that that people are real educated, people with factual information. For example, there was a situation where a brother came to me. He was from Cincinnati. Shout out to the 513. He said, well, listen, people are telling me that the first president of the United States was a black man, who was the head of the Continental Congress, something like that. And she showed me a picture. And I said, well, he was like, that doesn't make sense. I said, why doesn't that make sense? He said, well, because photography wasn't created until the 1850s. And this is the picture of someone back in the 1700s. I said, exactly. Critical thinking prevented that guy from being manipulated.
Matter of fact, I know about that. Matter of fact, I forget the guy's name. He was a senator of Liberia. The guy was a senator of Liberia. He had the same name as
they were using a picture of a guy who was a senator in Liberia to represent the guy who was the first president of John Henson, right? So
John Henson,
this type of subterfuge taking place, right? And so once again, if someone's presenting misinformation, you really have to then take the position, either you've been duped or you're trying to dupe me, right? Well, and I would argue that.
That's why I would say to the people listening, because there's so many people out here talking with a lot of political immaturity, is that you have to, they actually aren't making it any easier to become enlightened and informed. And if anything, they're making it more difficult, because you still have to go get the information yourself. So I recommend looking at budgets, city budgets, going to budget hearings, going to local school advisory council meetings. Get out and go to some of these community meetings. Just sit back and just listen. Maybe go to a march or a protest. Again, if you're not with marching or protesting, that's fine. Just sit back, watch,
and
listen, observe. Research the history of reparations. One thing, and these are things that I'm doing. One thing, that's how I know what these people with big platforms, they're not talking about certain things. They keep talking about, well, we need reparations, but you have to produce a harms list. There are reparations movements that are making some headway in terms of reparations. I could go along because I've had to go out and get the information for myself because I'm not getting it from all of these people talking on YouTube who talk very broadly, very immaturely.
Yes.
They cannot stand to be questioned. They like
Yes.
all the accolades, but none of the.
And if I could, part of that ties into what you mentioned regarding typically their success is what YouTube. That is what they've accomplished.
Yep. Well, that's
I've seen that before. Matter of fact, because I was on somebody else's platform, and the guy had like 1 million followers, and he was making claims that was just completely ahistorical. And when I started fact checking him, he said, "Well, why are you attacking me?" I said, "I'm not attacking you. I'm just asking questions. You're the one who came up here and made these statements that were patently false."
Yeah.
So. And that's when I realized a lot of people on like, as people like to say, the YouTube streets, factual information doesn't matter. And I was blown away because I wasn't aware of that. But it is a major issue. And so we have a number, like you said, a number of people in our community. And I always push people, read the literature for yourself. Take time, like my children, when they were younger, they're teenagers now, but even now, they would have to read at least 30 minutes to an hour every day after dinner. Right, because reading text that challenges you, right? One, it requires you to build your vocabulary, but it allows you to engage in critical thinking. We have no leaders African Americans in the post-civil rights era, right? It allows you to engage in critical thinking. What did Frederick Douglass say? Education makes one unfit to be a slave. Mm-hmm. Right. This is why after the Stonewall Rebellion of 1739 in South Carolina, state legislatures throughout the 13 colonies began to outlaw reading, because at the time we were allowed to read, we was able to pick up things, and that's why we was able to plan the Stonewall Rebellion, and it was very successful.
Yep, and they took over Florida too.
Right. So this I tell people, like, and matter of fact, I was at the gym, and there was some young man from the continent, from Ghana. They were going to some church, and they told the white guy who was the Bible study head teacher. They said, "Well, we talked to this guy named Lumumba, and he was telling us this stuff." The guy was like, "Don't listen to him anymore." And I said, "Listen, if someone doesn't want you to educate yourself, they do not have your best interests at heart."
Yeah, that's true.
If someone doesn't want you to educate yourself, their goal is to control your thinking and subsequently your behavior. And so then I asked the brothers from Ghana, I said, if what they're telling you is Christianity is right and everything else is wrong, then what does that say about the indigenous religions and culture of the people, brothers and sisters in Ghana? It means that it's evil.
Yep.
And they would say, "Damn, we never thought about it like that." I said, "Yeah." So we find that typically on the continent, there's a belief that in order to be a good Christian, you have to have a Christian, and you can't even have an African name. We find the same thing with Islam.
Yep, a lot of people
have an Arabic name.
Yep.
So we see that this type of pedestalization of other groups of people's cultures, right? So that's why it is an issue.
But what I would say, and I got this hat, by the way.
Well, I was going to touch on.
I couldn't find my Hosea around here somewhere, but I got this hat walking down the street in Kumasi, Ghana.
Okay, that's right.
And one of the things that all the people blogging on YouTube, they haven't really studied. They just went over there. So see, it's one thing. One guy called, I'm just say who it was. Go Black to Africa. Early in his channel, he was in Ghana and he saw the Ngenyame symbol. I have some fabric here that I got. I got this at a shop in Accra with the Ngenyame. He saw.
I was over there. I was in Accra. That's the Dinka symbol. That's the Dinka symbol.
This is a Ngenyame.
Yeah, but they call it Dinka too.
This
The symbol I'm talking about, the symbols.
Oh yeah. It is one of the Adinkra symbols, yeah, and it's called the Ingenument. And you see this all over everywhere. And so go back to Africa, went to Ghana early in his channel a few years ago, and he said, "Ooh, I see these Oriental symbols everywhere."
What?
Do you know how he thought these Oriental symbols because he hadn't done any study?
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing about, and I got into Dynas about this too. They think because they've been there, but they haven't studied or reoriented their thinking.
Yes.
So they don't even know what they're looking at, even though they're there 10 toes down. And that's the frustration I have with a lot of these people on YouTube. And then it ends up being combative. I get cursed out, cut off, and that's why I won't speak to Dynas publicly to this day, because he did that to me. And I tried to call him privately to clear the air, and he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't. So
people who know me knows I make my number available to people privately. So there are several times I have conversations with people offline. Brother Daniel would be one, because I on my website, if you go to LumumbaSpeaks.com, my number's on there. That's where you got my number at, right?
That's how I got your number. Yep.
Daniel,
but I want to touch on something.
That's, or what is your standing now?
What you mean, far as standing, far as what?
Like, are you in the nation now, or are you
no? I'm not. I can't go with the doctrine. I don't accept that pseudoscience.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I don't believe in Yaqub. Okay, because I mean, it's because they said Yaqub was in Mecca 6,000 years ago. 6,000 years ago, Mecca didn't exist. I mean, the tribe of Shabazz, I can't go with that no more. I'm more into. I'm interested in animism. I studied a little bit of Ifa. You know what I'm saying? I'm more into that. You know what I'm saying?
I remember one of Dr. Tway, who was like my first professor when I started school many years ago. He had a student come to him and said, "I want to study. I'm going to do my term paper on the tribe of Shabazz." And Dr. Tway told him, "Good luck." He came back a week or two later and said, I can't find any information on the tribe of Shabazz. He said, "Yeah, because it never existed. It's not that it was made up."
It was made up. It's pseudo.
Yeah, and like you said,
that was some pseudo stuff that Farad Muhammad came from. That brought that wasn't Elijah Muhammad. It was Farad Muhammad. Yeah, Farad Muhammad. You gotta remember them old followers of Farad Muhammad. They didn't even finish high school. Half of them were undereducated. I'm gonna be honest with you. Okay, so he was able to get that. He was able to get that story across because they didn't have. A lot of them came out of Christianity. Okay, a lot of them were migrators from the South. Okay, like I got people. Listen, a lot of like you take Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad only went to the 4th grade. Okay, because he was a sharecropper.
Most people didn't even go to the 6th grade back then.
Yeah. So you got to remember he was able to get that over because look what kind of people they had. They didn't have the information to challenge him at that time.
Yeah, but many of the upper echelon of ministers, I'm thinking of, there was a brother Omowale. He died. He was editor of Final Call, and I remember
I know Abdul Wali. You talking about Abdul Wali?
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him before. I know.
And Will Smith came to the funeral. He snuck in when it was kind of over and had his hoodie on. But Will Smith came to Brother Omowale's.
You know why? Because Will Smith bodyguard Charlie Matt. Me and him was in the nation together. He was in the nation too. His bodyguard, Will Smith.
So I know Will Smith knows information. I just don't know how much that actually impacts his behavior and what he does. He's another one. He's always on these philosophical platitudes. Everything that comes out of his mouth, every question you ask him, he goes off on a philosophical platitude. To the people listening, when people do that, they go off on platitudes all the time, but the practicalities of how they live their life are in utter contradiction to what they're saying. That's a red flag should go up. And that's what Will Smith does.
Very true. Yes.
All these philosophical platitudes, and they're not practical. When you ask him about what to do about the problems in West Philly, he'll rep West Philly real hard. But okay, what do you do about West Philly? I've heard him say, "Oh, I defer to people a lot smarter than me on those kinds of issues." He ain't bringing none of that philosophy to West Philly to problem solve. So I want to get to problem solving, philosophical problem solving that becomes practical and operational. And I that's probably the way I can leave it here. because we could go on all day.
Right. I'm gonna give everybody final thoughts, but I just thought about this. So so I have the organization I was part of in Dayton, Coalition of African Unity. We also work with another organization known as the West Dayton Youth Task Force, and we were able to create a Juma Mosi Shule, a Saturday school, African-centered Saturday school. Each Saturday from 8 to 1 p.m. Students would show up, get breakfast, leave with lunch. But we focus on things like, of course, reading, writing, and arithmetic, African history, had the kids playing chess. So that is an initiative that is still taking place in Dayton, Ohio, at the McClendon Art and Dance Institute in West Dayton on West 3rd Street. So there are still some things going on. I also was a board member of the African American Cultural Festival. No longer on the board because I moved away, but there are still some things going on in the city. And one of the things, the benefits about the African American Cultural Festival was it was a year-long organization. So it wasn't just the culture festival that would take place every August. There were different initiatives and programs and events that we would put on throughout the year, right, to help create this concept of an African village. I was a member of the Dayton Africana Elders Council, right? So this concept of creating this African village where, of course, and we know preeminent in traditional African culture is what accountability. Everyone's held accountable. So where you have Watoto, you have warriors, nation builders, and then, of course, elders. So I am someone who's done the work. I'm not someone who just pontificates on social media, even though I did have to take a step back because of my doctoral journey. But the biggest thing for me, as I stated, is treating our people's material needs as holy.
And I would agree a little bit about my Black resume. I have a Black resume that I could rattle off. Let me just give a couple of them. I was an OG content creator back in the 80s when you didn't have the internet yet. You had public access. By the way, people own the airwaves, by the way. So because of that, cable companies were mandated to create a public access channel. They're still around today. And so I did a show called Steve Coakley Live and Uncensored. I don't know how many of you here know about Steve Coakley, have heard of Steve Coakley.
Yeah.
Well, I met his son in Ghana. I met his Steve Coakley Jr. in Ghana.
Yeah, he's in Ghana now.
Yeah, I met him.
And Steve Jr., he ran out on the show, the very first show me and Steve did, and he had on Mickey Mouse ears, and it was the thing. So one thing, so I'm an OG content creator. That's number one. Number two, I was tasked with the mandate of get her ass out the studio and get out there and organize. And that's when I realized that just doing media wasn't enough. Because a lot of people are sitting back, well, I'm getting the information out. I'm teaching the people. We can't do nothing till we get the information out. And people have a political education. That's part of it. All roads have to lead to organizing and advocacy, providing for and protecting ourselves. So you can start out doing media and education, but eventually at some point, it's got to get off of the internet and get into real life problem solving. That's a little bit about my Black resume. One thing about Steve, because a lot of people are saying we shouldn't vote, we don't need government. Steve Coakley started out in government. He was an aide to Harold Washington. He was a very good friend with Carol Moseley Braun.
That's true.
The head voter registration guy for, I think, the Urban League at one point. He had some college education. He ended up, he would tell the story. He did about like 3 weeks in a mental institution, because this stuff can drive you crazy. It can drive you crazy as you start to get psychologically reoriented. You can be discombobulated for a little bit of time. So he actually, and he tells the story, did a few weeks in a mental institution. I myself have had mental health issues and was institutionalized at one point, but I can feel anyway. So a little bit about my Black resume, and one thing I want to say to people, because a lot of these people were saying that they're really pro-Black and militant and all that stuff, is that we don't need politics. Steve not only did he start out in politics, Steve dealt with policy breakdown. That's another thing. People aren't dealing with policy. All this personality back and forth, and criticizing and finger pointing. And that's all Diallo and those guys on Earn Your Leisure. They sit back and finger point about Umar Johnson and Killer Mike and all these people. So we have Black people bickering back and forth, and we're not really analyzing policy. So we could get to dealing more with policy and less with personality. We could be more productive and informed. We have to read policy, study policy on violence prevention, policy on
Absolutely.
Afrocentric. I can go on and on. So that's just something I want to leave people with. There's work to do. We've got to figure it out. Don't look at the previous generation, the civil rights generation, as not having done anything or accomplished anything. Do an objective critique about what they did right, what they did wrong, and that goes for the ancient African ancestors too, because oftentimes
there was mistakes made. There was mistakes made.
We made some mistakes. Oh no, we didn't. You're just being European. So
well, yeah, and what that really speaks to was romanticizing African history. And one of the things,
a lot of people do that. That's true. Yeah,
but Dwayne Omowale, who's the resident historian here at Lumumba Speaks and Bleak Cloud Networks, talks about is that when you romanticize history, you don't know what to do when there's an actual problem, right? But if you actually study history in depth and not just on a surface level, then what you will find how our ancestors address issues from an African-centered frame of reference, right? Rather than romanticizing the history, and then there are no solutions to the problem. But Brother Daniel, I'm gonna let you close this out. Final thoughts.
Yeah, he said I'm a hypocrite. What he say? She's hypocritical. Haha. She's about
well,
that.
Once again, Brother Zion, I know you are a brother that's on the platform, but once again, we do not make personal attacks here. We don't do that. We attack the argument, not the person, right?
That's right.
We don't do that. Zion, I haven't even given you the half of it, so you're hypocritical.
That's quite all right. Quite all right. Brother Daniel, I'm gonna give you the final word or the final call, as you all used to call it. And said, we're going to go.
My purpose of doing that, I want to set at liberty the captive believer, because a lot of people are captive to a belief system, and you can get caught up. You know what I'm saying? And if it robs you of your free thinking, and want you to think the way they want you to think, you need to get out of that. So that's problematic. I'm saying, and I just wanted to shed light on that, and we need to have more discussions on that, because it's a lot of pseudo stuff out here, a lot of pseudo doctrines out here that need to be exposed.
How can we function in pluralism? Because we're never all going to be the same.
I understand what you're saying, sister.
Operational unity. Mm-hmm. Operational unity. Real quick, Sister Michelle, if you look in the private chat, I put my number in there. So but it's.
Let me find it.
Yeah, the private chat. It's simply operational unity, right? And so, for example, I have my critiques in the Nation of Islam, and I'm very open and honest about that. But I've also done work with the Nation of Islam in the community. And I tell people, if you're in the community, there are times there's no way you're not going to come in contact with them.
That's right.
We've done the work regarding food drives. We've done the work regarding back to school supplies, right, where you provide supplies for children going back to school. We've done the work regarding a Black parent group. I remember when I was in the military, I created a Black NCO organization. When I was the president of my daughter's Black Parent Association at my daughter's school. She was at a private school, and I was the president of the Parent Teacher Association. And so as the president of the Parent Teacher Association, I was able to set the schedule for the monthly family night events we would have at the school. So guess what? The whole school year, we made sure that every event we had every month was African-centered. The school was 99% Black. Right? So then I remember we're at the meeting before the school year starts, and then said, okay, so what are we going to do for December? I said, we're going to do Kwanzaa. Duh. Right? Well, how are we going to do that? I don't know what Kwanzaa. I said, it's okay. I've been celebrating Kwanzaa for 20 years. I could do it. No problem. Right? So part of it is making sure we're putting ourselves in positions to make those type of decisions, those type of critical moves, to particularly to the benefit of the young people, right? And so that's a big thing for me. We talk about the work of one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, William Edward Blyden. He focused on working with the youth, because as we know, and as I remember Dr. Tway taught me, they begin to attack our children's minds from the moment they leave the womb. right? And I noticed when I had my son, I'm like, golly, this is real. Anti-blackness is ubiquitous, it's pernicious, it's intransigent, right? So we have to start early to inculcate and instill in them a healthy Black identity. Some of the work I did with able youth leaders, the Alliance for the Betterment of Leadership and Education, which was a derivative of the teachings of the US organization with the Simba Malika Wachanga under Dr. Malana Karinga, who was the founder and creator of Kwanzaa. We did a lot of work on violence prevention. A lot of work on violence prevention. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask, so when you say Kwanzaa and Karenga, and then people say, how can you celebrate Kwanzaa when Karenga was an agent who wore a wire?
So a couple things. One, there's no evidence that he was an agent. He actually went to prison for 5 years. Agents don't go to federal prison. But he went to state prison. The second issue is Kwanzaa is not a heroic or religious holiday. So Kwanzaa is not a celebration of any individual person. Kwanzaa is a celebration of our Africanness, right? There are 7 principles. Yes, 7 principles that go along with that. So that's some part of the conversation that I have. I also had the benefit due to Baba Larry Crow with the Institute of Positive Education of reading the transcripts. Karinga wasn't even present when those sisters were tortured. However, if you know anything about how the US organization was ran, it was top-down military type structure. Nothing happened unless he signed off on it. So even though he wasn't there, if you know how that organization worked, right now, the other issue is Geronimo Pratt. And we know Geronimo Pratt spent about 20-some years in prison for a crime he didn't commit because the prosecutor violated the Brady Rule and withheld exculpatory evidence that showed he was in Oakland at the Panther Party meeting at the same time that he was allegedly killing somebody in Los Angeles, California, right? And so when he finally got out of prison, of course, he received $1 million settlement and he moved to Tanzania with Pete O'Neill. However, he said it himself. He said Karinga was an agent. He said we were being played against each other by the FBI.
Yeah, he did say that. Geronimo Pratt did say that. He sure did.
So I mean, it was COINTELPRO, right? One of the Queen mothers who was one of my mentors, Barbara O, who starred in the movie Daughters of the Dusk, who actually starred in a movie in which Muhammad Ali played the mayor of a post-Reconstruction town. She actually did healing rituals with Iyanla Vanzant in the 1980s. She told me that she had actually moved to Los Angeles right after the shooting that took place at UCLA, right? And so there was a lot of mistrust, but he wasn't an agent. However, he was responsible for those sisters, I believe, being tortured. They thought
that's the problem I had with him. With the torture of the sisters.
Paranoia going on at that time. But I always tell people, take issue. If you take umbrage with Karinga and what he did, they take umbrage with the Panther Party. Right, Elaine Brown elucidates to this, speaks to this in her book "Taste of Power," that there was actually organized physical and sexual abuse of Black women in the Black Panther Party, and that after one of the sisters she was very close with was violently and brutally sexually assaulted, that's when she said, "I got to go. I got to get out of here." So, unfortunately, once again, we talk about building on the strengths and deleting those weaknesses. One of those weaknesses of those movements was the treatment of our sisters.
Yeah.
So
there's no way around that.
Nobody passes the white glove test, and that goes for Panthers, Nation, Harvey.
Yep, that's facts.
You have to be able to be objective and not emotional about it, but still have some degree of reverence and respect. Because there's a guy on here, Taz Exclusive, and he tears down Garvey and everybody else because he says we have to get away from hero worship. And I think hero worship, there's a continuum of that. When the people become messianic figures, we don't want that, but we do still want to have a healthy amount of reverence and respect because of the things that they've done, that we're even here today with the opportunities that we have to stay alive and fight another day.
Absolutely. And for example, I always talk about Dr. King. Ideologically, I don't align with Dr. King. Right? I've read Dr. King's autobiography. It's right behind me here 3 times. Much of what he says is absolutely nonsensical. His concern was saving white people from themselves. Don't know why the French socialists want to do that, but he did. But I respect his gravitas, I respect his sincerity, and I respect his courage because he made the ultimate sacrifice. Right? And so, once again, it's, like you said, it's about coming into these conversations in these perspectives from an intelligent standpoint, not an emotional standpoint.
Exactly.
Right. But as I said before, for me, it's always principle, not personal. And I have to keep, I I have to keep the same position, irrespective of who I'm talking to. I was having a conversation with a young man at the gym, and he knows who I am. He knows what I'm about. And something took place with my son. He lives in D.C. with his mother. And I said, what my son did was wrong, 100%. He said, you know what? I really respect you. He said, because most people would make an excuse for what their child did just because they're their child. And I said, no, right is right and wrong is wrong. It doesn't matter who did it. But I said, part of that is because that's the way my parents raised me. If I was in the wrong, my parents wouldn't take up for me. If I was in the right, my parents was out there hitting a home run. They was like out there like they was King Griffey, right? And so, but I said that's part of our traditional culture that everyone is held accountable, right? And so we kind of gotten away from that, and there's numerous reasons why we gotten away from that. I probably could do a show on it, but these are some issues, right? For me, it's about being principled, not personal, and being consistent. Right. And typically what happens is, unfortunately, when we're going to just bring this full circle, when we talk about the nation, people, they conflate, they misrepresent, they are afraid to critique because of the fear of violent reprisal. And one of the issues when we talk about a cult is that typically what the leader says is factual. And even when you provide it with information that shows what the leader is saying is false, you still won't go against it. So that lack of an inability to engage in independent thinking is extremely problematic.
It is problematic.
Extremely problematic. Because what it comes down to is not only just menticide, but also brainwashing, to where you are unable to even think. You can see that this isn't true. Like Brother King David, we broke down, hey, listen, these things are untoward. It's farcical. It's apocryphal, right? They're engaged in a subterfuge, and he's still trying to find a way to defend something that is completely false. That's when it gets scary. Very quickly, one of the reasons why I have such respect for Malcolm X is because he made a decision that was based on principle. You are committing adultery. You are having sexual relations with teenage girls who are very impressionable. You are the religious leader of this group. And not only are you impregnating them and kick them out the organization, you refuse to take care of your own children. You see what I'm saying? Right is right and wrong is wrong, no matter who does it. Right? I'm not beyond reproach. Matter of fact, I remember child was born. We had a naming ceremony for the child. Barbara Crow drove up from Dayton to Columbus for the naming ceremony. I had on like a t-shirt and some sweats. Barbara Crow said, "What are you doing?" In front of my children. "You and I dress appropriately for this event." And he said this to me in my house. You know what I said? "You're right, Baba." I went and I got dressed in appropriate attire, African garb. And afterwards he says, "Well, I didn't mean to, correct you in front of your children." I said, "No, it's good that you corrected me in front of my children, because it shows that I'm accountable to someone as well."
I went through a situation in Ghana. I stayed at this Hebrew Israelite guy's. No, I didn't stay at his house. I visited him at his house.
Home, yeah.
Yeah, and he said something that was not true. He said that the Khoisan people of South Africa and the Twa were Hebrew Israelites, and I corrected him. I said, "Brother, that's not true, brother. They don't have no Abrahamic oral traditions in their oral tradition. They were animists. They had nothing to do with Hebrew Israelite." So this is what he tells me. Ain't no debating in this house. You can leave. You can leave.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I said, "Brother, I'm gonna tell the truth, brother. I'll leave, okay?
Yeah,
I'm gonna tell the truth. That's not factual evidence. What you just said."
You were in Ghana, in Africa?
Yeah, I was in Ghana. I went to Ghana, and
I mean, you probably saw them. You see Hebrew Israelites, you see Rastas, the whole nine when you're there.
To the people listening, what I want you to know is you might think, "Oh, anybody going to Africa? Yeah, they down, they cultural, yeah, they black, they right." You have all kind of ideologies in Africa, especially in Ghana. You have Rastas, Hebrews, you have Christians, you have culture nationalists. Somebody like Dr. Gambon teaching at the University, the linguist, I would say he's a culture nationalist. So you have all different kind of ideologies. And the problem is not the location. The problem is the subjugation. So just merely being on African soil solves
absolutely nothing.
Now, get back to this Hebrew Israelite. Matter of fact, he used to be part of the Pan-African village, but he broke off and started Zion Village because he wanted to, do his Hebrew Israelite stuff.
Very quickly, we got to wrap this up. I got to get to bed. But one of the issues I have with the Hebrew Israelites, and maybe I do a show on that as well. My brother's a Hebrew Israelite. Get the fuck out of Dayton, right? Get the hell out of Dayton, right? Is that their belief is that they're not African.
Yep, someone tell you that.
Their belief is we're not African. We were tricked into being African, and we're going to continue to be oppressed until we deny our African identity and claim a Hebrew identity. So I said, there's no way I could work. Matter of fact, I told Brother Steve Muhammad, he was on my platform a couple of months ago. I said, there's no way I could work with someone like that because their whole basis is denying the fact that they're African.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you the dangers of them that I saw in Ghana. The same individual, he got installed as a chief, but he won't go through the rituals. He didn't go through the rituals of chief because he said that's against the Torah.
And
that's problematic. That's problematic. How you gonna go to somebody else's country and impose what they've been doing for way before you Hebrew Israelite? They've been doing that that's their culture, and you're gonna come with there and tell them, you ain't doing that because that's against the Bible, against the Torah.
Yep, and the chiefs let him do it because he probably broke them off some.
Yep, and that's problematic.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've all been there. So listen, we're going to tap out, family, because I got to get up in the morning. Appreciate everyone for coming in. So listen, you all subscribe, hit the notification bell, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Hope to see you all next time. Until then, make sure you always bet on black. Peace.
Black
power you got my information, right?
Yes, sir.
Power you have right now.
Okay, you got my information, right, sis?